When I was young, before my life, I was a part of the oceans and sky.
Who are the Huxley family? Most of us have heard of Aldous Huxley, but what about the rest of this influential family? As we observe his dystopian novel, Brave New World Order, that's playing out right before our eyes, was this a prophetic prediction or predetermined predictive programming on a level that's off the charts in conception? Some dystopias claim to be utopias, and this is exactly what we're all living through now. A dystopia is a society characterised by a focus on that which is contrary to what the public believe is actually true, like mass poverty, financial collapse, public mistrust and suspicion, a police state, or totalitarian oppression. Obviously, this is all for the public's own safety. It could also include forced or cajoled medical procedures. The late great philosopher and researcher Alan Watt did some fantastic work relating to the Huxley Dynasty. He and a few more individuals were trailblazers in this area of research. In my research, and in all our presentations on this subject, we're merely picking up the ball and running with it from where researchers like Alan Watt left off. The Huxley Dynasty is linked by blood, marriage, friendships and ideologies to many famous, influential individuals, families, corporate entities, NGOs, and also ideological movements that have shaped and continue to shape human existence throughout the 19th, 20th and 21st centuries, and no doubts beyond. There have been many Huxleys throughout the last 150 years, and they are spread far and wide. The Huxleys are intertwined with many different academic disciplines, from early Darwinism and dinosaur theories, to transhumanism and eugenics, to early multimedia technologies. They are ingrained into popular culture via literature, and also at the forefront of major changes in society like the 60s counterculture. As you would expect, not all these individuals carry the Huxley name, but they are still Huxleys by blood. The Huxleys are one of the hidden hands in the spider's web of deceit. So we're gonna forensically sift our way through the evidence, and we'll find Huxley fingerprints everywhere in this DNA trail. The Huxleys are in essence a secret Masonic club all of their own, helping to change the course of history and human civilization in perpetuity. So Julian and Aldous are descendants of King Edward III. That then leads us back to King John, the signer of the Magna Carta. The Huxley dynasty is directly related and intermarried into the Darwins, Galtons, Wedgwoods, Pease, Arnolds, Grosvenors and the Royal Bruce families, to name a few. Sir Julian and Aldous are distant relations too, the Bush family. They are also related to the Vanderbilt family. Via these families, they are in turn related to even more royalty and other prominent families. According to conventional wisdom, the people we mention in this presentation and throughout this series were all picked at random. The universe just dropped them into place at just the right time, so they could do their jobs like good little worker bees. What about the Freuds or frauds? I find it impossible to believe that they were all picked out at random, and much of Sigmund Freud's work was used by Edward Bernays, Freud's double nephew. Bernays is also linked to Aldous Huxley. In an article I read, it said Aldous Huxley and Edward Bernays realised in the 1920s that the utilisation of conditioning and propaganda techniques could be used to control and manipulate the masses. We can now see the continuation of this work via The Next Generation with Mark Bernays Randolph, co-founder The Next Generation of Mind Control via Netflix or Netflix, or get a fix. It is well known that Aldous Huxley was George Orwell's French teacher for a semester at Eton. Aldous Huxley and Orwell are also descended from the same lineage, back to Edward III. Did they know this at the time? Did they stay in touch after Eton? All this research in this podumentary is taken from the mainstream. Opinions are given as observations, but the truth is in the evidence. So please enjoy your servitude. There is no doubt in our minds that we're living through the Huxley's Brave New World Order. Just who are these flockers?
What is the bearing of the laws of heredity upon human affairs? Eugenics provides the answer, so far as this is known. Eugenics seeks to apply the known laws of heredity so as to prevent the degeneration of the race and improve its inborn qualities.
An example of favourable heredity is shown by the pedigree of the Phelps family, members of which have been boatmen on the Thames for generations. 9 members of this family have won the race for the famous Doggett coat and badge. On this diagram, the 9 winners are shown in white. The present head of the family, whose father was a royal waterman, is Bossy Phelps, the King's barge master, now no longer an active sculler himself, but still a coach for others. His son Ted is ex-world and English champion sculler, and also a royal waterman. Ted's brother, Eric, is challenger for the English championship, and, like Ted, he shows the superb physique which has been in his family for generations. Here is a man who, although normal, comes from a mentally defective family. Here is his wife, who is also normal. They have had 17 children. Let us examine the pedigree of these children. 5 of them died in infancy. 3 are still too young for an opinion to be formed of their mental state, a boy and 2 girls. Only 2 of the remaining children are normal, a man and a girl. The remaining 7 children are all mental defectives, marked on the pedigree in black. Of these, 2 live at home, a man and a crippled dwarf girl. There is 1 man in an institution and a woman with the mentality of a child. The other 3 are all girls and are all in an institution. How has this disastrous state of affairs come about? If we examine the pedigree of this family, we find that although the father and mother of the youngest generation are both normal, the father's brother was insane. Their mother was normal, but the father, the grandfather of the youngest generation, was defective, and his 2 brothers insane. Another famous family is that of the Terrys. All the individuals drawn in light colour on this pedigree possess exceptional talents for the stage, music, and art. Dame Ellen Terry, the great actress, was one of the most outstanding members of this family. Here is her portrait as Lady Macbeth, which is now in the Tate Gallery. Beside it stands her daughter, Edith Craig, who is an actress and an expert in historical stage costume, and well known as a producer of stage plays and pageants. Her brother, Gordon Craig, is recognized both in England and abroad as a genius who has been a notable pioneer in modern stage design and lighting. His son, Edward Carrick, is a stage designer and artist. Now let us see some of the other well-known members of this family. Ellen Terry's brother, Fred Terry, the famous actor, married Julia Nielsen, an actress and singer. Their daughter, Phyllis Nielsen Terry, is a distinguished actress with a beautiful singing voice. Her brother, the late Dennis Nielsen Terry, had a distinguished career in the theatre, and his daughter, Hazel, is now at the beginning of her career on the films. Ellen Terry's elder sister, Kate, was, before her marriage, an even more distinguished actress than Dame Ellen Terry. One of her daughters is Mabel Terry Lewis, the actress, and another daughter, Kate, married Frank Gilgood, a fine amateur pianist. Of their children, Val is dramatic producer at the BBC, and John is perhaps our leading romantic actor. In this figure, we have represented the differential rate of increase in a population where originally half the individuals were below the average in physical and mental ability and half above it, and where couples below the average have 3 children as against 2 produced by those above. In the first generation, there will be 3 below to 2 above. In the second, 4.5 below to 2 above. In the third, 6 3/4 below to 2, and in the fourth, rather over 10 to 2. The lengths of these grey and white strips represent the average of the population of each group. So you see that in a mere matter of 4 generations, individuals below the average have become more than 5 times as abundant as those above it. And so, if we want to maintain the race at a high level, physically and mentally, everybody sound in body and mind should marry and have enough children to perpetuate their stock and carry on the race. Lastly, I would like to thank the distinguished members of the Phelps, Godfrey, Terry and Gilgood families for their invaluable help. Thanks are also due to the warden and medical staff of the institution for training mental defectives. And finally, we want particularly to thank the father and mother of the family showing mental defect for their public-spirited cooperation.
You're listening to Sheep Farm Studios Meet the Flockers presentation. This is episode 7 of the Huxley's Brave New World Order series entitled UnNatural Selection. And this will be part 1 of another mini-series within a series of a whole series, if you like. With me as usual is our Chris. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. No, which piss drinking green tea?
Green tea today. Well, it is 10 to 2 in the afternoon on Friday, the 16th of February. If you've been following this series, you will have seen we've been covering some of the roads that lead back to the Huxley family, either by blood or other relationships, to the social upheaval we're witnessing now. In this part of the series, we're discussing in detail the Huxley family dynasty. Overall, apart from Aldous' famous book, Brave New World, which this series is called after, the Huxley dynasty as a whole receives little acknowledgement in mainstream popular culture in context with the effect that was and is still made by them. Very little has been written about the Huxley dynasty other than it being a positive effect or a positive outcome on society. But their involvement was essential in the New World Order's plan. Make no mistake about it, this dynasty is one of the cornerstones of social change. For instance, the patriarch of the family, Thomas Henry Huxley, was a close friend and supporter of many of you no doubt know, of Charles Darwin. He's also linked to many other notable characters in the mid-1800s who were smack bang right in the middle of evolution theory. Thomas Huxley basically invented flying dinosaurs without a scrap of evidence. Not even a beak. The Huxleys are related into the Galton family, and it was Sir Francis Galton who came up with the term eugenics that we listened to when Sir Julian Huxley was talking about the mental defectives earlier on in that brief documentary that we played. Galton was knighted in 1909. Sir Julian Huxley went on to become president of the British Eugenics Society. And Sir Francis Galton was the one, apparently, who the Nazis or the Nazi party supposedly based a lot of their pure Aryan ideologies on. But this was not just Nazi ideology. A lot of what we're witnessing now still use the same rebranded ideologies. It's just a little more subtly presented. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, if you look through like we were just saying earlier, look through the history of genetics, it's a dark horse, isn't it? But started with the English, but then I was looking at the American eugenics, and then it was kind of taken over to America, and then really let loose, and then weirdly stopped or quietened down. I think it's a height in like 1915, quietened down in 1942 around Hitler's rise, and then he ran with it, didn't he? It's weird when you think of it like that. Yeah, it's weird when you think of it like that, isn't it? That it came from England to America.
But like a lot of these things, on the face of it, there is nothing wrong with really wanting a better human being, is there?
But then when it's in the wrong hands,
yes,
the people in America who were getting sterilized were, Hispanics, Black Americans, Native Americans, and people who they found undesirable, which is could be anybody, couldn't it? So you can imagine if it was implemented in this day and age, it's whoever's not agreeing with what we're doing, kind of thing.
Yeah, who might they be?
And like you said, it's core trying to create you can see something in the core of it, but as soon as anyone's telling someone else what to do, you've got some kind of ism, haven't you? You've got some communism or dictatorship.
Yeah, I mean, again, to talk about, say, mental defectives, as we're going to come on to in a bit.
We could be labelled mental defectives, couldn't we?
Exactly. It depends what you want to be labelled as a mental defect. It's strange, isn't it? Because we're living in an era where if you think you're a woman, but you've got men's bits, that's perfectly normal.
But if you
disagree with that, you're mental defective. Yeah.
It's all about perception, isn't it?
Yeah. and it's changed because 20 years ago it was totally the opposite. So they can switch and change it, and it's all part of the same process, isn't it?
But it's quite shocking that it went right up to the 40s from then. So you're talking 50, 60 years. This will have been hovered about, and then it didn't actually get taken. Already, Virginia repealed its sterilization laws in 1974. So they were still kicking around. They just weren't using them.
They weren't telling us they were using them.
Oh, they weren't telling us they were using them. It makes you think, like going through what we've gone through. Was it more in people's faces than the letting on? And people resisting, was there more, protests about it and stuff? Because we never know. It's right back in history, and we get this little bit of history that we're allowed to.
Well, again, Chris,
because it stopped for some reason, didn't it?
Yeah, as we do this research, I don't think it has stopped. I think it's just changed.
No. What I mean is, the people were behind it. Americans were behind it. You know, a lot of institutes, women's institutes, all kinds of institutes were behind the idea of it.
Well, whether it's Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood, wasn't it?
Yeah, another one. All these, they've spun them off now, so you can't see a eugenics movement.
Well, you've got eugenics and you've got Depop, haven't you? And I suppose it's a little bit different in a kind of way. I suppose eugenics now has been coupled with depopulation, hasn't it?
Yes.
Which it probably was in the beginning. Just they were trying to sell it to the public in a disguised manner. If it was to breed a better human, I suppose, like you said.
Yeah, superhuman.
You could get people on board, but then it comes down to certain people weren't allowed to get married. You had to get vetted. So then you're slowly seeing that.
Well, in that documentary, they were talking about the pedigree
Yeah.
of the family, the Phelps family, all that type of thing.
Exactly.
And
then they start talking about bloodlines. So now you're going into a different territory, aren't you? You're not going into territory where someone's mentally deficient.
No.
You're saying we're better than you.
Did you see the bloodline at the end? That was the Gielgud bloodline, and they went through all the Gielguds. Showed all the actors. All of them were actors, or to do with stage and theatre and things like that.
Yeah.
And
so the old Gielgud of England, as we all know, who died not so long ago. I suppose you were like the end of that
line, if you like. Yeah. But there's loads of spin-offs because they're not all called Gielgud, are they now?
Yeah.
As we were talking about, say, Lawrence Fox and his family, there's loads of them, the Fox family, that were all actors.
Yeah.
They would have been classed as that pedigree, weren't they, at that particular point?
Is that how it works? Did they give a family the acting job and then another family the, like in the old days of America, like Fritz Prima used to say, where one of them got the fur trade, one got the railroads, one got, is it like that?
Well, it certainly seems
this
that
family
way.
Are politicians, this family are artists, this family are psychologists, this family are media.
Well, look at Keir Starmer. If you do research on his family background, he hasn't really got that same sort of bloodline. He's one of them successful peasants. I think it comes to a stage where you've literally signing these mini Faustian bargains along the way. Maybe you don't know you're signing them until it's too late, or maybe there's a big one at the end of it and you're passing through that door. But at some point, you're being offered these steps up the ladder, aren't you? And some families seem to have that on tap, don't they? And the Huxleys are one of those families that seem to have that academic Manchurian candidate bloodline.
Like Aldous Huxley, his dodgy eye. And certain other things, you get the feeling that they were as tormented as anybody else.
Well, we're going to go into it where there's a massive mental illness runs through the Huxley family.
But is it early MK Ultra? Is it Satanism? What?
Well, I'd say all the above, because as we know, a lot of these people, going back, say Boris Johnson, they're into eugenics. They've looked like they've had they've definitely had trauma, whether it's MK Ultra, they've definitely had trauma to control them.
But if there is, as people think, or say, these satanic bloodlines running the shit show or the world, we don't know what their rules are, do we? Or what their, some people do or claim to or do or been involved or whatever. But we don't really know what their ins and outs of their daily existence could be a totally different, you've been born into it.
Well, it comes back to that analogy again. You walk across the field, you don't worry about how many spiders or beetles or worms you've killed, do you?
No.
And if their rules are like that, then we're irrelevant to them. We're irrelevant. Many of the families related to the Huxleys were founding members of the Lunar Society of Birmingham, also known as Lunar Society, first called the Lunar Circle. It was set up in the 1700s, and their children were called Lunar Children. Many of these founders of the Lunar Circle were high-ranking Freemasons like Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the US, a drafter and signer of the Declaration of Independence. Other founders included the Wedgwoods, the Darwins, and the Galton families. Going back to your satanic worship, I don't think these people set these. Obviously, it were different times. They didn't have PlayStations or Netflix or anything like that. So they would be doing different things that have discussion groups, wouldn't they?
But look at that. You've got the Wedgwood family. That was pottery, wasn't it?
Yes.
Wedgwood in Stoke.
Yeah.
When England had some clout. I mean, but that, even though it's pottery now, we'll go get it from IKEA or wherever. Yeah. But pottery would have been a big thing, wouldn't it? Throughout the...
Yeah. And then when you throw into the mix,
the 80s,
Selby Downard's Bone China story.
Before mass production, pottery was like Sheffield steel.
Yes.
Stoke was pottery. Sheffield was steel.
Yes.
These towns had some clout, didn't they?
I want to repeat a couple of haunting phrases that the patriarch Thomas Huxley, Sir Julian Huxley, and Aldous Huxley were quoted in saying. In these few quotes, we see the plan of the New World Order from the late 19th century to the 20th century. And going back to what we were just saying there, it does seem like a satanic cult that we're talking about. First, Thomas Huxley who was described as Darwin's bulldog. In 1869, Thomas originally coined the term agnosticism. This was his brainchild. He came up with agnosticism. And these are important type spell words, aren't they? I would have thought, especially around there. Agnosticism is the view or belief that the existence of God or the divine or the supernatural is unknown or unknowable.
Well, you got that word and eugenics. These characters both dreamt them words up. How many people
Yes.
do you know have dreamt a word up, and then it becomes part of the popular language?
LL Cool J.
It's true, isn't it? I mean,
It
so,
is,
like
yeah.
you say, that spell word was dreamt up by him or whoever, whatever group of people,
Yeah.
to be thrown into the English language
Yes.
that never existed.
No.
I don't know anyone who can do that.
No, I don't. He's got the power to say, right, this
Yeah.
word's going in the
Or the
dictionary.
backing to follow it through.
Agnosticism simply means that a man shall not say he knows or believes that which he has no scientific grounds for professing to know or believe. Can you see where that's going?
Mm.
If you're not an expert,
Yeah.
then you know
shit.
nothing. Yeah. So these are the early signs of we've got to get these experts that are more knowledgeable than the plebs.
Mm.
And the plebs, you've got to listen to these people because they're more knowledgeable than you, and we'll invent words to make it look like we're more knowledgeable than you.
Mm.
So somebody's not just thought of that word, but they've actually come up with that meaning as to what it means.
Don't trust your instincts, trust the science.
Yeah, trust the science. Think about what he says. We live in a time where we have to trust the science, even when our better judgment says no.
Mm.
To give our trust requires us to believe, and to believe means we hand over our intelligence, knowledge, and physical jurisdiction to others who have more qualifications and shiny diplomas, e.g. science or any form of entertainment.
Yeah. Do as you told you think, get.
Yes. As well as agnosticism, Thomas Huxley concluded that birds evolved from small carnivore dinosaurs, a belief still widely held today. It's weird, isn't it, Chris, that these beliefs or theories are told to school children as truth.
Mm.
You tell
Facts.
a school kid that flying dinosaurs, that feathers, all this type of stuff, and it's not told as a theory. They don't say, this is a theory, so it's not true.
No,
There's
the only
proof of it.
unsure bit about dinosaurs is how they got wiped out.
Yes.
But they've established that's a meteorite. But how many meteorites have you seen land in your lifetime?
There's loads. There's loads of historical evidence in the last 150 years of meteorites hitting.
They just don't
Earth.
seem to exist, do they?
No.
There's always a threat of them and historic meteorites, but
The Natural History Museum says it's true, though, Chris.
I'm no Brian Cox, but I ain't seen one.
No.
Or any evidence. of it.
And the Natural History Museum, it's a while since I've been in, they've actually got an area dedicated to Darwin, haven't they?
It's a while. Did I go? No, I went to the Science Museum. I would imagine so.
It might be the Science Museum, but one of them's got an actual area that's called
No, it's
like a
that
floor of it.
museum.
Yeah. Along with the plastic bones that are made in China.
Yeah.
Of them Diplodocuses. Yeah.
Well, I was saying in one of our recent podcasts, if you buy some pajamas for your kid, they've always got dinosaurs on. You struggle to get them without dinosaurs on.
Mm.
So it's really embedded. I mean, what kid wouldn't find the idea and a bit scary and exciting that some giant lizards used to wander around? I know I did. I was obsessed with dinosaurs when I was a kid.
Godzilla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
now
Thomas,
Hollywood selling it to us.
yeah, every year. So
All the
Thomas
time.
Huxley said, it is an error to imagine that evolution signifies a constant tendency to increased perfection. The process undoubtedly involves a constant remodeling of the organism in adaptation to new conditions, but it depends on the nature of those conditions whether the direction of the modifications effected shall be upward or downward. What if we're going to be if we're going to evolve? It sounds like he's talking about something else there. I'll come to that set. If you're going to evolve, why would something evolve backwards? Why would you devolve? You wouldn't, would you?
Well, again, that's like the eugenics thing, isn't it? Where they were saying that, people they considered backwards or whatever,
mentally defective,
they weren't allowed to get married, or they weren't allowed to marry each other.
Yeah.
So they were trying to split them apart because they were saying they were inferior human beings, and they just produced more inferior human beings.
Yeah. And it comes back to that, then when people say now, the actual show off that they're on the spectrum, I must be on the spectrum. There's poor kids suffering in terrible ways of autism. But then people saying they're on the... So
Do you know,
are they
it's fun-
purposely been damaged to put them in a condition where they've got to sort of hold their hand up for some form of eugenics treatment, whether it's Elon Musk's Neuralink type of thing?
well, it's funny you say that, because over the last few weeks I've heard a lot of people talk about ADHD and these things. I don't know why. I've just heard a lot of it lately. You know, people in families with more than one, numerous illness in the pair. You know, but we've talked about it before. It's been trendified, hasn't it? And now you literally, people say I'm on the spectrum with a big smile on the face.
Yeah,
it's bizarre.
It's like a badge of honor.
It's weird, isn't it?
Like, why aren't they angry?
I know.
Why are they asking questions as to why am I on the spectrum?
And also, the same people that came up with these spectrums, people selling them the drugs, selling them the soma.
More eugenics. Yeah, selling them the soma, yeah. So Julian Huxley came out with some great, but interesting paragraphs. This is one of Sir Julian Huxley's, just to give you a flavour of who these people are. This is the guy that was doing the documentary earlier on. The lowest strata are reproducing too fast. Therefore, they must not have too easy access to relief or hospital treatment, lest the removal of the last check on natural selection should make it too easy for children to be produced or to survive. Long unemployed should be a ground for sterilisation.
Bloody hell.
Are you the lowest strata, Chris?
Yeah, probably.
Strata means a level or class to which people are assigned, interesting choice of word, according to their social status, education, or income.
Well, again, going to Brave New World, they assign you your job before you're born. And
that must be a coincidence, that, Chris, that Aldous Huxley wrote more or less exactly what Sir Julian was saying.
And the babies are brainwashed from birth, like literally told what they're going to be doing. So it's like it's a caste system, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. And by the way, this isn't any depth into these individuals. I'm giving you an overview on some of these individuals. We're going to go into detail about more the family, some of the family individuals in the Huxley family who you've probably never heard of, because I'm sure I know I didn't hear of them. But when you see where they come from, you know that the organisations they work for are important. So he also went on to say, as political and economic freedom diminishes, sexual freedom tends to compensatingly increase. And the dictator will do well to encourage that freedom in conjunction with the freedom to daydream under the influence of dope, movies, and radio. It will help to reconcile his subjects to servitude, which is their fate.
It's funny when you think when he wrote that, when he said that.
That's Sir Julian Huxley, that. Not Aldous Huxley, that's Sir Julian Huxley.
And then you've got that guy, what's his name, Ferrara, Yuval Harari, saying, I saw him being interviewed, and they said, but you know, there's going to be so much ease. There's not going to be enough work for human beings. What use are human beings going to be? What's the solution? And he said more drugs and video games.
Wow.
He actually said that. So is drugs and video games? I mean, I know Huxley won't talk about video games, but it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? No, I play video games.
Yeah, well, movies stroke video games, it's the same principle.
Movies, video games. He says radio, but that's music, isn't it? And look where movies are now.
Yeah.
So you could have seen how big they were going to get, I don't guess.
So we've got Francis Galton that came up with eugenics. We've got Thomas Huxley that came up with agnosticism. And now Sir Julian Huxley came up with the term transhumanism in his book, New Bottles for New Wine, in 1957, in which he said, I believe in transhumanism. Once there are enough people who can truly say that the human species will be on the threshold of a new kind of existence, as different from ours as ours is from that of Peking man, it will at last be consciously fulfilling its real destiny. Peking man was Homo erectus pekinensis.
Do you know that on a blooming dark spiritual side, they must have known what was coming. You can't
Oh,
say that
yeah,
they were smart
yeah.
enough. You know what I mean? Are they looking into a massive vat, cauldron, a boiling whatever, seeing the future? I
Oh,
mean,
the
we were
Lunar Children.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, we were talking about the other day that the
Moon
iPad
worshipping.
and all this technology that came out of nowhere with no one's name on it, saying they
Hmm.
invented it. You've got to think that this stuff came from somewhere else. It was given to them or dreamt up, or you know, I don't know, did CERN spin round and throw it out? I don't know. But some of their predictions are too close, aren't they?
Well, they're not just too close, they're bang on, aren't
They're
they?
bang
H.G.
on, yeah.
Wells and Aldous
Yeah.
Huxley and Orwell and a lot of these other people who we talk about. They're I can't even call them predictions anymore.
No, that's basically what I was trying to say. It
Yeah.
looks like they were tapping in somehow into
To
what was
future
coming.
knowledge.
Or maybe it's all just happened before, just different.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. These bloodlines didn't know it. You know, they remember it or have it recorded.
Yeah. Or they're just giving us a peek into that world. And at the time, it seems that far in advance that no one's going to believe that what he's
No.
just said there.
No.
But then roll on 2 generations, it's too late. It's happened. Just like what happened in 2020.
And they couldn't go for the control they're going for without the tablets and the iPhones and the etc. You know, without the net,
Yes.
the web to catch us all.
Well,
They couldn't-
again, what
they
did
couldn't do
he
it
say?
together.
The freedom to daydream under the influence of dope, movies, and radio.
And also the sexual freedom, which is even in our lifetime. I mean, you've gone from. I mean, when we were kids, it was quite prudish TV, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You've gone from that to seeing a ladyboy playing drums with his knob.
Yeah. But
So-
he's talking about sexual freedom before the swinging 60s.
Yeah.
Again,
So the
how many of
swing
these words and lines as economic freedom diminishes, we're seeing that. As
Mhm.
sexual freedom tends to compensate increase, we've seen that. Or we've seen that. All of these things, every line in here, people under the influence of dope, watching movies or playing video games or listening to music, we're seeing that.
Mm.
We just did a full series last summer with Mark Devlin and Matt Sergio about the second summer of love, which people still think was an organic, random event.
But you've gone from them 2 summers of love from 60s and 80s, 90s. Then look where we are now with you know, tablets and pornography. And I saw an advert in Daily Mail online for it wasn't an advert like story, but it was for a blooming I don't want to sound crude, like a masturbation machine.
Right.
But it was saying how good it was. And I thought it was like a story advert. And you're like, that's where we've come to.
Yeah.
It's in the newspaper as news.
Well, I saw there were a guy. One of my mates is on the BBC Britain's Greatest Menu or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm only watching it because he's on it. But there's a guy on there who's a supposed comedian, right?
Right.
And he ain't a comedian. He's got a tattoo. It's like he's just got a tattoo. He doesn't even look like a suits a tattoo, right? He ain't funny at all, and he reminds me of. Can you remember RoboCop? That guy, I buy that for $1, and everyone laughed. Yeah, every time RoboCop went past that window and it had TVs in it,
Yeah,
and
everyone
that
just-
were always on.
They
Yeah.
were programmed to laugh at it, weren't they? They were
Yeah.
Pavlov's dog to laugh at it, weren't they?
And we used to talk in the 80s saying that's where humour's going to go.
Mm.
Can you remember when we watched
Well,
that?
that was the point of it.
We were
I
only
mean,
15 then.
I mean,
Yeah.
Verhoeven, Jesus, he genius at again predicting the future.
Exactly, yeah. Predictive programming.
And then you flash forward, and we ended up with what was that? Where they used to go around kicking each other in nuts.
The MTV nonsense.
Yeah, you know what I
Yeah,
mean. What's it called?
yeah.
I forgot what it's called.
Yeah,
I mean,
anyway,
how many kids got damaged and dead from that?
type of humour.
Yeah.
I know.
Pushing each other off buildings and kicking yourself in nuts and stuff.
That is like that type of humour, though. That biological robot type
It's a
of brain
degradation of
damaged humour,
society, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the total degradation. Everything is right up to the point now where, yeah, like you said, you can have a pair of tits and be a bloke, and you're the nutter for questioning it.
Yeah. But it's yeah. And by the way, we're talking about this stuff. We're only sort of talked about 3 or 4 statements here, and already this family have invented 3 or 4 words that are controlling society.
Mm.
That's without them writing any books or doing any work.
I mean, what going back in what transhumanism, even though he coined the word, didn't mean anything then, did it?
No.
Because what could it have meant?
Well, I mean, look where we are now. Transphobia,
Mm.
transitioning,
Mm.
all these words Now, going back when he wrote that in the 1950s,
Mm.
you know, bear in mind he was the president of the British Eugenics Society.
Mm.
So that they haven't come up with just some random words.
And the other word, which, you know, belief in nothing.
Yeah, agnosticism.
Everyone then was probably quite highly religious.
Yes.
Even going up to 80s when we were kids, people were still quite religious.
So you can see the breakdown of whether you're religious or not, the breakdown of the actual spiritual part of religion, right? Which I don't think anybody can really argue with that part, right?
Yeah.
Whether you go into there and you become spiritually kind and all this type of stuff.
Whether you're religious or not, there's a bunch of morals there, weren't there? So they could have redone it as moral teachings almost. Whereas now,
well, again, in Israel, they'd say they're religious, but yet how can that be part of their religion doing what they're doing?
Well, killing one human being and you're no longer religious, eh?
No.
Surely.
No. So Aldous Huxley came out with a few choice statements as well. One of them was, technological progress has merely provided us with a more efficient means for going backwards. People will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think.
Pluck out Teslas as one example.
Yeah.
When we were kids in 80s, Saturdays, there were always blokes under the cars, weren't there? Trying to put an odd coloured wing on the car. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, wiping spark plugs down.
I mean, people enjoyed it. That's the thing. They enjoyed tinkering with, because we're naturally that kind of being, aren't we?
I used to love going into an old guy's garage. He all smelt of paint or oil and stuff like that. And he'd go into their garages and they'd have all sorts of tools and tackle and stuff like that. That have car jacks up, you know, underneath it, just doing bits and bobs on it, wouldn't there?
Everyone could tinker, couldn't they? I could tinker.
Yes.
When I first passed my test, I could change, you know, oil and change the wheel and all that stuff. I don't know if I could anymore.
No, now they've made it impossible.
Yeah, because now you take your car into a garage and they rig it up to a thing that reads it to see what's wrong with it.
Well, in our village, we had G's garage, right?
Yeah.
G's garage. It was one of those where you drove over that wire that rung a bell. You came out and filled your car up. It had an MOT centre and a garage there that did all works for local people in the cars. There were another one in another village further down in Sowood. And now you could just call in and say, I've got a problem with my car, and they'd have a look at it for you. Yeah. Now it'd take you a month to book your car in. And you've got to go through all this paperwork and nonsense. And so everything, going back to what he's saying there, technological progress has merely provided us with the more efficient means for going backwards.
Well, like we said before, mechanics aren't mechanics anymore. They're just checking for diagnostics.
Yes.
Even chefs, like, I'm not saying there's no chefs around anymore, but what I mean is your average, if you went to work as a chef as put it like this, right? When I was a young lad, and I'm not saying all this is wrong, but for instance, balsamic reduction, I remember we used to make it, right?
Yeah.
I remember it not being able to, you couldn't buy it. Now you can buy it, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was a thing that was part of your trading, I suppose.
Yes.
To make these things. Now you can buy everything. You don't need...
They've trained the skill out of people, haven't they?
That's what I'm trying to say. You don't need any skills, do you? But that's what he's saying there.
That is what he's saying, yeah. As we know, when we mentioned this before, when our mum used to cook on the Aga fire, the coal fire oven, and make Yorkshire puddings, there was a certain amount of energy and spirit and love went into that cooking because you were providing for a family, right? Yeah. And millions of other houses around the world were doing the same thing. And when you see indigenous people cooking that big pot in the middle of the village,
even lighting the fire, just lighting the fire. Every person lights a fire. Of it. Everyone knows that when you light a fire, you stare at it intently.
Yes,
you bring something out in people.
There's a spiritual thing about
around with the fire.
Yeah, there is. You're right.
And now they want to stop that. They want to stop the stoves. You can't have a wood burner because now it's destroying the environment. Even though it's the thing that's kept us warm since dinosaur times. Now we're not.
Dinosaur times.
It's bad for the environment now to burn wood. You know, the thing that grows back is you shouldn't burn that.
No, you shouldn't burn that stuff. It's horrible stuff.
I mean,
listen to this one for a joke, right? England football team, right? This is how mad.
Already a joke.
Stuff, it's already a joke, right? So obviously, when they do World Cup qualifiers, they've got to fly somewhere. And I saw this news story that it's just typical clown world that sums up all these statements that these morons were making 100 years ago. So the FIFA, the governing body, have obviously signed up to carbon neutral nonsense. So they can only fly so many miles. Yeah, they've got to land and then get a coach for 6 hours instead of just flying straight to place. Yeah. This is the lunacy that we're living.
Well, that's going to solve all the problems that they've dreamt up.
That's going to solve the problems that don't exist in first place.
Yeah.
And also, that reminds me of, like when councils, when you see, how come there's about 5 foot of cycle path there? What? Because they've got a quarter to it, it's so many miles of cycle path. So they're willing to spend 100 grand doing 10 foot of cycle path in somewhere that's just obscure, you know what I mean? Outside some building or something like that. There's no cycle path, then there is 10 foot of it, then there's no cycle path because they've got a quarter to it. And it costs 150 grand or something to make that cycle path.
Yeah.
That is what he's talking about here. It gives us a more efficient means of going backwards. And people will come to love their oppression, to adore their technologies that undo their capacities to think.
Well, if we're not there now, I don't know when we will be.
No, I mean, again,
I'm guilty of that, fine. I'm guilty.
We all are. We've all been drawn into it, Chris, whether we like it or not.
I'm sat here on a laptop with my iPad next to me.
Yeah. Here, look, there's nothing. Technology's all right if you don't allow it to control you. It's two different things.
Or if whoever's built it doesn't want to control you.
Yes, either way. Yeah. Is it a coincidence that Julian and Aldous' maternal grandfather was Thomas Arnold? We've mentioned before, an English educator and historian, headmaster of rugby school, who was credited in being the father of organised sport, thus inventing stadium sports way back in the 1880s. He was also said to be the very cornerstone of the British Empire. This praise came from Charles-Pierre de Freddy, a.k.a. Baron de Coubertin, who co-founded the Olympic Games in 1894. Inspired, no doubt, by Thomas Arnold, who was Julian and Aldous Huxley's other grandfather.
Have they forgotten about old Romans and Greeks that used to do stadium sport?
Well, apparently not. They used to fight dinosaurs.
He invented it in 1800.
Yeah. I think going back to your conversation about the Harari geezer, right? I look at him and I think, some scholars and academics and fans believe that Aldous Huxley was some kind of prophet. And I think that Harari's been given that type of
Has he been given
title
that
for some reason. Yeah. An enlightened man of the time, warning us of the coming totalitarian control. Maybe he was. I don't think that. Or maybe it was just all a coincidence on top of a big pile of other coincidences. Or it could have been the revelation of method. And as I say, possibly like Yuval Noah Harari of the World Economic Forum and Israeli Defense Forces, which he was part of a spin-off group. We did some research on him. There's no doubt I think he's part of Mossad or some kind of movement. You don't get that sort of push for writing a couple of history books.
Yeah. He gets lauded everywhere you see him.
Yeah.
I think even my son Seb was reading his first book.
Yeah. Which you can understand why young people are drawn into what he's saying, because what he's saying is true.
Yeah.
That is like what Huxley was saying. The difference with him and Huxley, he's not saying anything we don't already know. Huxley was saying that the Huxleys, or not just Huxley, the Huxleys were saying this 150 years ago.
Yeah, and he's part of WEF, and
yes,
he's telling you what they want to happen in the next 20, 30 years.
Yes, which is quite plain to see. They were saying this before anybody could even conjure that idea up in their head.
Yeah.
With the evidence we've amassed in the first 6 episodes of the Huxley's Brave New World Order, we have to realise that these people are part of an elaborate plan to change the whole of humanity. What I hope you will see is that the Huxley family were deeply involved in the academic reset that occurred during the 1800s, specifically around about the mid-1800s, which was the precursor to what we're going through now. In his famous book, Aldous Huxley talked about eugenics and mind control via a drug called Soma, if I'm saying that right. Soma.
Soma, yeah. Sure.
I think we can all safely say that the evidence is overwhelming that this is happening now. Even if it's not just one drug, but a concoction of chemical frequency weapons delivered in varying different ways. Brave New World's main theme is the incompatibility of happiness and truth. Think about that statement there. Happiness and truth are incompatible.
I would say it's the other way around.
Well, you'd like to think it were the other way around, but they've changed it, haven't they? Again, it's that twisted satanic view of things, isn't it? Where they say that Happiness and truth can't be compatible. They can't live together in the same house.
Yeah.
And that is, it sort of sums up what we're actually living through. That we're being told that this is good, what we're doing is good, when in reality, people know it's not good.
Well, what are we doing that's good? Giving money to certain countries, trying to douse everyone with something they don't want. What good have they done? What good has been done recently?
I mean, think of what the World Economic Forum and Sir Klaus Schwab mantra and his ilk are preaching. You will own nothing and be happy. That he could go back up to that. You will enjoy your servitude.
Well, we're getting there. Now, if you think going back to the 80s and any further, or even 90s, even 2000s, CDs, music, records, DVD, we own those things. I'm not saying, and again, this is not necessarily wrong. It's only wrong if it's controlled. But now it's Netflix, Spotify, even podcasting, whatever it is.
Yeah, you buy data packets.
You're not buying anything solid, are you?
There's nothing tangible, is there?
Cars are leased. No one buys anything.
Yeah.
But again, it could all be good if it were for nefarious reasons.
Yeah.
If it were for reasons of control, is there anything we don't actually, we're reaching a point where we don't own any. Even books are going, aren't they?
Yes, because you've got Kindle
or Audible or whatever.
Which, if you think about Kindle, what do you use Kindle for?
Setting fires.
Book burning.
Burning books on Amazon.
When we were talking with Mark and Matt Sergio in the summer, and we're talking about vinyl records, when DJs played, there was a certain energy they played. It was probably the last analog thing that was done on 1080s, the decks, as they called them. But even them, with Matt's research into where they started from, that was basically some kind of listening device, frequency device that they used.
Well, but
militarily,
even a record, he probably didn't replace a live band, does it?
No.
And people probably went out and listened to more live music and singing.
Well, again, even I use LED lighting. Lighting was like warm light, wasn't it? Now you've got this like surgical white, high grade, like weaponized white light. That's beamed into people. And digital music is the same. You listen to these, I don't listen to much music now, especially modern music, but it's overproduced. It's so clean, there's nothing there. It's not human-like anymore.
Yeah. You have to be careful not to be a total Luddite, don't you?
Oh, you have to be careful.
And I'm a bit of a Luddite, if I'm honest.
Yeah, yeah. But there's nothing wrong with the technology. I remember somebody said to me, "Oh, technology is great. You can email and go on Facebook." And obviously I'm involved in that from a telecommunications point of view. And I said, technology is great unless it's killing you.
But even the age-old thing, where the Luddite came from, is it's going to take our jobs. And I agree, but I also disagree in a way. If it's going to take us jobs, then other jobs will appear, won't they? Well, for instance, right?
If they're allowed to appear.
Yeah, well, what I mean is, in reality, what I mean is you can't stop moving forward.
Progress.
Because when someone invented a horse and carts, and we're going, hang on a minute, that's going to stop me and my mates.
That's my job, yeah.
That thing up there. Then they invent a car, well, that's going to stop the horse and cart, etc. So you've got to move, like the robots that are delivering pizzas, right? Wicked. You know what I mean? Why not? I've seen them down the road there delivering takeaways.
It's when that robot drags you out of your house that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, with that same technology. But what I mean is, someone's not going to be able to deliver pizzas, but someone's going to have to mend them robots.
Yeah, Will Smith will sort it out.
You know what I mean?
Slap him round head. Yeah, with his camp wrist slap.
You can't stop progression just because we think it's, like you were on about the lighting. Yeah, lights you can get cold lighting, but you can still get the warm ones. And the cold lighting is good for drawing or making sculptures, as I know, because I've got daylight bulbs, for instance.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm trying to say? Don't you?
I do know what you're trying to say. But again, going back to
room
eugenics,
for everything. Isn't there?
Going back to eugenics, is there anything wrong with trying to make humans better? But it's when it's passed into, because there's always a yin and yang and an opposite.
Yeah.
They tell us that, again, going back to it, they tell us the benefits, but they don't tell us what the downsides are.
Well,
that's why you know that they're lying.
They're wiping out indigenous populations.
Yes. Why most Aborigines now are alcoholics or Native American Indians or whatever, or Maoris, heavy drinkers.
Well, not all of them, you can't say that.
Well, all right, sorry, not all. A high proportion of them are.
Well, like a lot of the communities in England and America, they decimate the poorer communities, don't they? Basically,
yeah.
Or certain It's targeted.
Yeah. I suppose when lies become truth, the truth is a lie, and that's again we were talking about earlier on the real. Huxley satirically in his book. This is what I read a description. Huxley satirically communicates how much control society should give away to technology. And now listen to Elon Musk and Yuval Harari. They're preaching the same thing, aren't they? Where then you've got the opposite of Bitch Tits Gates, who's basically saying everybody should be tapped, and you've got to go along with it or else. What Elon Musk's saying? No, you've got a choice. You don't have to do that. You don't have to go down AI route. You can have a superhuman. You just put this chip in your head, and then you've got to come back and have a Tesla upgrade every 6 months or whatever.
But you have to wonder that is it a lot of this stuff that they said at the beginning, like if you take a Tesla car, is it not working? Is it not working how they wanted it to? Or is it just the first stage before they...
I don't know, do they care if it works or not? They're just going to bring it in anyway. I talked to somebody who sells cars the other day, and he said, oh yeah, this, I forget what type, a Jaguar, electric Jaguar's selling well. I said, that's only because you're doing a deal on it. Well, yeah. I said, you're doing a deal on it because they're not selling.
People aren't warming to it, are they?
No, people aren't warming to it, but people will warm to it when you give them 25% off, for arguments, or 50% off.
They did that at the beginning,
credit,
didn't they? They did that at the beginning, yeah.
Or give them a free electrical charger in the house. Another sentinel.
Another thing as well, like the Tesla came out, then all of a sudden a year later, or within the everyone's making electric cars. How long would it take to make an electric car?
Yeah, well, I mean,
it's not just a coincidence that they came out, then they came out a little bit after.
Electric cars as well, Chris, going back to the analog sounds, electric cars make an awful noise, don't they?
I think
that noise like a milk float.
No, I think that noise is putting them so you know they're coming.
Right.
I don't think they actually need to make any noise.
No, just an horrible electrical. It's horrible, isn't it? You know, like when you hear, you don't like cars, and I'm not a big car freak, but if you hear a nice car, you do say that you know that certain car's got a growl on it, or that one. Don't do up for me. Some people, petrol heads, will enjoy that, or even a motorbike. But there is a certain sound to it, isn't there? Going back to the difference between a record and an iPlayer, for argument's sake. Yeah. In the book Brave New World, these technologies included hypnopedia, which is the process by which moral and ethical lessons are taught to conditioned individuals in Brave New World. It works by repeating selected phrases over and over again while a person sleeps. Hypnopedia, also known as sleep learning, which is an attempt to place information in the head of a sleeping person, typically by playing a sound recording to them while they sleep, reconditioning the person to be more malleable. In 1927, Aloe Benjamin Salinger invented the psychophone for sleep learning. Imagine what today's technology can do to, I'll say vulnerable people, but people who are more susceptible to this. When most people sleep with a phone at the side of their head. The psychophone is an interesting name to use because the word psychophony is the name given by Spiritism and some other form of spiritualist traditions to the phenomenon where, according to them, a spirit communicates with us using a voice of the medium or a medium. Is this what microwave technologies are being used for, to summon up or connect with other beings? Are these technologies being used as a surrogate medium?
Yeah, the Black Mirror. I mean, we're literally carrying them around with us, aren't we?
Yeah, they're glued to us.
Scrying mirror.
Yeah. But no, I thought that was interesting. So he's writing about this hypnopedia going back in, 1930s in his Brave New World. And then roll on, this guy's inventing this psychophone. And then it's part of the Spiritism where they're using it as a sort of like a common denominator to connection to a node, if you like. But anyway, if we look around at our family members, friends and work colleagues, we can see that people are sleepwalking or hypnotized. They may look like they're awake, but they're actually zombified. Things are then repeated over and over until they believe it, and then they believe it is reality, when reality is something totally different. That's happening now, Chris.
Mm.
That's happening now.
I'm a bit of a zombie sometimes, to be fair.
Well, I think we're all zombified at times. So let's not think that the lobotomization of these people just happened by chance, or people in general. Another technology Aldous Huxley discusses in Brave New World is extreme contraceptive measures. I think we can safely say that they have this covered with the pill, chlorine, fluoride, aluminium, plastics, jib-jabs, and other significant medical interventions.
Well, not even that, just that fact. I mean, I was reading an article the other day, and you see a lot of these articles saying why women shouldn't have children now.
Yeah.
You know, people bigging it up, the fact that I read an article the other day, I decided not to have children. I mean, it's gone from where they were encouraging, you know, every woman should have a career. I'm not saying women shouldn't have a career, but everybody, if you basically, we got to a point where if you haven't had a career or strive for one,
Yeah.
you're an idiot, you know, and if you just wanted to settle down and have children, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
Who do you think you are? You know, you need to.
You've wasted your life, basically.
You need to strive for whatever. And now it's reached a point with global climate where they're telling an whole generation that producing a child is bad for the environment.
Yeah.
Which you couldn't get any more satanic than that, could you?
Not really, no. And also, they basically tell women that you've wasted your life if you haven't got a career and you end up out and you have children instead.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, exactly.
And
it's weird.
And I watched something the other day, and it was this woman being interviewed on Canadian TV, and her son had now transitioned to a girl, and the son had a dress on. His legs wouldn't stand still while he was saying he's a lot happier now he's transitioned to a girl. And his mum, she looked at absolute nuts. There's some research on PubMed that says it was some massive proportion of children who transitioned said that the mother, specifically the mother, on something like 60 or 70%, it was a massive proportion, were all either psychologically damaged, i.e. they were narcissists. Yeah? So the mothers are being diagnosed as narcissists.
Well, you can see
it
how
was
that works.
It was too. Yeah, you can. Yeah,
because they've been the mother's been propagandized. Then they have a child. Child gets to an age, starts questioning sexuality maybe, and then they jump on it because they want the Instagram hits.
or they want the control. Yeah,
you know what I mean. You can see it, can't you?
Like and it's generally boys as well. It's boys that turn to girls, not the other way around. So it's the mother that turns the boy to a girl.
Right.
Convinces the boy that they're a girl.
Which is something that this scenario never existed 20 years ago.
No.
Now it does. So if you can't tell me that's a psychological operation, I don't know what it is.
Well, not like you just said, like you say quite a lot, where the Satanists get the normal people to do their work for them. That is an obvious part where they're getting their work done for them, innit?
Yeah.
Over a lifetime, this is simply called eugenics. The globalists now call it bioethics, and the Satanists call it evolution. Whatever we want to dress it up as, it's the same thing, isn't it? The Huxleys are like the academic version of the Rothschilds' financial dynasty. In fact, they are just as influential, I would say. They're happy to go unnoticed, financially uncompensated, although they're not poor, and forgotten about, but still managed to get into all the major schools, colleges, universities. They write books, they make films, they run eugenics societies, UNESCO, etc., etc. Very powerful people. They seem to be content to have made huge changes to humanity and not be financially rewarded, if you like. I think that's more of an ideology. They're ideologically driven, which I suppose the powers that be find people who think like we do and people who are listening ideologically driven, if you like. And that's a hard one to control, isn't it? Obviously the Huxleys are part of the control mechanism of the New World Order, whereas I suppose we are part of the New World Order, we would like to accept it or not, but we're obviously shining a light on it. In this next little bit, I want to talk about the Huxleys and mental illness. One thing that's become apparent in this research while we're doing this part of the research into the Huxleys was that the family has a very high rate of mental illness issues within it. Or as Sir Julian Huxley called them in his 1930s eugenics documentary, mental defectives. So Julian himself had mental issues and struggles with mental illness, and he struggled mentally for the entirety of his life. So even while they were making that documentary there that we played at the beginning, he was struggling then at that particular point when he's giving that talk there about mental defectives. He was struggling with mental illness. That's who's running this place.
Mm.
Thomas's brother, George Huxley, suffered from extreme mental anxiety and died in 1863. There's the numbers again. There always seems to be numbers in this when they come up as well. Huxley's own father actually died in Barming Asylum. Thomas's brother, Dr. James Huxley, was a well-known psychiatrist and superintendent of the Kent County Asylum. Sounds like a lovely place. aka Barming Asylum. Opened in 1833. There we go with numbers again. Now it's called, or was called, the Oakwood Hospital. Ironically, Dr. James Huxley also went gaga and was, by the age of 55, as near mad as any sane man can be. And he's running the mental asylum. Thomas Huxley's favourite daughter, the artistically talented, that's another thing, generally a lot of these people are artists as well. The artistically talented Marion, known as Maddie, who became the first wife of artist John Collier, who we'll go into in a bit. She was troubled by mental illness for years, and she died of pneumonia in her mid-20s. So a lot of them are dying young as well. They don't have a lot of longevity. Huxley himself, we've got a more complete record of him. As a young apprentice to a medical practitioner, aged 13 or 14, Huxley was taken to watch a post-mortem dissection. Afterwards, he sank into a deep lethargy. Huxley recuperated on a farm, looking thin and ill. So this is Thomas Henry Huxley, the patriarch of the family. Thomas Huxley, on his third voyage on HMS Rattlesnake in 1848, suffered a debilitating depression. He had further periods of depression at the end of 1871 and again in 1873. Finally, in 1884, he sank into another deep depression, and this time it precipitated his decision to retire in 1885 at the age of 60.
Was depression even a word then?
I don't know, but this is on official pages of theirs, and he invented flying dinosaurs.
I find it interesting they keep saying depression. I wouldn't even be sure that existed as a word in them days.
Well, sure. Flying dinosaurs and agnosticism didn't exist until they invented it, so maybe that's when they invented the word, Chris.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Because that was when, again, going back to the Freuds and stuff like that, that's when he came about, around about the mid-1800s and late 1800s as well. This is enough to indicate the way depression, or perhaps a moderate bipolar disorder, inferred with his life. Yet, unlike some of the other family members, he was able to function extremely well at most times. The problems continued sporadically into the third generation. Two of Leonard Huxley's sons, so this was Thomas Huxley's son, so two of his grandsons, suffered serious depression. So Julian Huxley suffered a breakdown in 1913, and 5 more later in life. Trevennan Huxley, is Julian's brother and Aldous' brother, committed suicide in 1914. In fact, both attended the same institution together at the same time, around about the 1913-14 mark. They were both institutionalised.
Right. Zapped.
Well, when they were doing electric shocks, and I don't know what they were doing to help them recover, but if you got Sir Julian Huxley, for argument's sake, going back to what you said, right, more or less at the beginning, were they undergoing some kind of early MK Ultra style training? Were they being told things from a young age that they couldn't accept? I.e., just like, why would a 13-year-old go to a post-mortem? I know it were different times, you know. I mean, I were cutting meat up at 13 or 14 in a butcher's shop, you know, which were pretty normal to us. To most people, it'd be pretty alien. But
I used to go to slaughterhouse with my dad.
Exactly, so did I. Freaks you out. But so a lot of these people within this section of this family went gaga.
Interesting as well. He had to go and recuperate on that farm.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get trauma, if something happens, do you get to go and recuperate somewhere?
Well, I mean, a lot of what they do or did seem to say they've got some sort of financial backing from somewhere, some sort of backing, because they seem to, although they're not wealthy and buying massive stately homes and things like that, they seem never to struggle.
Yeah.
They go to Eton or they go to Oxford or Cambridge or they go to these schools, but they never seem to be like landed gentry or.
You always get to travel around the world as well.
Yeah, they always end up in America or India.
They're always a bit ill as well, aren't they?
Yes.
All these characters are always a bit ill. There's always something wrong with them.
Yeah.
They have to move because of a breathing problem or live somewhere else because of this or that.
Oakwood Hospital, actually, in Barming Heath near Maidstone, England, was a psychiatric hospital founded in 1833 that I mentioned earlier as the Kent County Lunatic Asylum. The word barmy, meaning mad or foolish, is popularly said to have come from Barming Hospital.
All right. There were a lot of psychiatric hospitals around, weren't there?
Yeah.
In the old days.
Massive buildings.
Beautiful buildings as well.
Beautiful buildings.
Especially in America.
Yeah.
What were they used for? Was it more totalitarian? The fact that if you didn't do as you told, you got locked up in one of them?
I don't know, Chris. They look more like, well, it's weird because they were beautiful buildings, but as soon as you knew they were psychiatric buildings, they had an horrible dark look to them, didn't they? It weren't like looking at St. Paul's Cathedral, for argument's sake.
No, but were they reconditioned buildings used for something else before?
Yeah. Yeah.
There seems to be a period in America where there are a lot of lunatic asylums.
Yes. Yeah. Again, the mid-1800s seemed to be an era where they were putting people in lunatic asylums as well. For odd reasons like, I don't know, a lady who cheated on her husband, for argument's sake.
Well, look at like we're saying about the eugenics thing in early 1900s, taking rise up to 1915 and continuing. If you didn't agree with that, or they were trying to cut the population down, is that what they were using them for? Because you were undesirable, you had to go in there and get sterilised.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
we don't know, because history
we'll never know.
Bullshit, aren't we?
Yeah, just written. So I want to dip us toe into some of the distant Huxley relations, see where it takes us. One chap, Sir Leonard George Holden Huxley, born May 1902, 29th of May 1902, died 4th September 1988. He was an Australian physicist. He was a second cousin once removed of Thomas Huxley, who we just mentioned. He won a Rhodes Scholarship to New College, Oxford, while in his second year at the University of Tasmania, where Huxley showed great academic and sporting promise while attending the Hutchins School. He obtained a D.Phil from Oxford. So here we go again with a Huxley, just being able to ship around the world, goes to Oxford, etc., gets a Rhodes Scholarship and a leg up. On 5th of October 1929, he married Ella Mary Child, known as Molly Copeland, who was reading history at Somerville College. I don't know if there's any relation to the Copeland brothers, i.e. Stuart, ex-police band member, whose father was CIA. That'd be an interesting line to go down. But this Huxley was a physicist at the Australian Radio Research Board and Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Which is interesting when you say that Julian Huxley said people are going to be controlled by the radio.
Start of it, though, wasn't it? The control mechanism, I suppose, the radio.
Yeah. He also worked at the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, Cicero, which is an Australian government agency responsible for scientific research. Bear in mind that the Australian government was basically the British government. At that point, probably still is, or City of London government. Notable developments made by Cicero have included the invention of atomic absorption spectroscopy, essential components of the early Wi-Fi technology, and a series of biological controls into Australia, such as the introduction of myxomatosis and rabbit calcivirus for the control of rabbit populations. These are the organisations he were working for.
Right. Still got myxomatosis in England, haven't
apparently. Cicero came up with the invention of the insecticide repellent Aerogard. The active ingredient of Aerogard is N-dimethyl metatoluramide, DEET, owned by Anglo-Dutch company Reckitt Benisca. During World War II, he was also principal scientific officer at the Ministry of Aircraft Production here in the UK between 1940 and 1946. He was president of the Australian branch of the Institute of Physics in the UK and president of the Australian Institute of Physics in Australia. We will see quite a few Huxley's descendants in this particular area of science and technology, like early communications, radar, radio, TV, research and development. Interestingly, the Ministry of Aircraft and Production from 40 to 45, firstly, to work for a government ministry, I would have thought you'd have had to have some intelligence clearance at the very least. But given Sir Leonard Huxley's career, I wouldn't bet on him not being some kind of intelligence or work within some kind of echelon of intelligence. There are a lot of government bodies working with secret science discoveries and research and development. The Ministry of Aircraft Production was one of the specialised supply ministries set up by the British government during World War II. It was basically responsible for all aircraft production for the British forces, the Royal Air Force, but also the Fleet Air Arm. The first minister was Lord Beaverbrook, who was then owner of the Daily Express. The initial chief executive was Air Marshal Wilfrid Rhodes Freeman, 1st Baron. Freeman was commandant of the Central Flying School, deputy director of operations and intelligence for the Air Ministry. So these are the people who he was subordinate to. And that's why I'm saying I think there was some kind of intelligence link there. The Director General of the aircraft production was Captain Eric Fraser, CBE, son of Sir Thomas Richard Fraser and brother of Dr. Sir Francis Fraser, who by chance, due to illness to his father, he could not attend. So Dr. Francis Fraser was asked to host a dinner in honour of Abraham Flexner. It was Flexner who convinced Fraser to go to the Rockefeller Institute for medical research in the United States for his postgraduate work. While in the United States, Fraser worked on poliomyelitis at the Rockefeller Institute. Anyway, back to Captain Eric Fraser, who was the boss of this Huxley chap. After the war, he became a high-ranking manager of ICI that was eventually bought by the Wallenberg family, which became AstraZeneca. And the rest, as I say, is history. Some interesting spin-off side notes about Abraham Flexner. Many of you will have known about Flexner, who wrote the Flexner Report in 1910, which examined the state of the American medical education system and led to far-reaching reform in training of doctors. Basically, they ripped up the rule book. The Flexner Report led to the closure of most rural medical schools and 5 out of 7 African-American medical colleges in the United States, given its adherence to the germ theory, in which he argued that if not properly trained and treated, African Americans and the poor posed a health threat to the middle upper class European Americans. Does that remind you of anything going back to...
Well, part of the eugenics movement was that they didn't want, African Americans and Native Americans to ruin the German...
The bloodline.
The white German...
European bloodline,
which is literally what Nazis were doing.
Yeah,
it almost seemed like they were doing it there, and then they thought, you know what, it's getting a bit big. Let's shift it somewhere else.
Yeah, I know.
Try it out there.
Or that with the incubator, and then they said, right, let's try it there.
I mean, I didn't even look how many people died during this eugenics movement and got sterilised. You never mentioned. I didn't learn about that at school, did you?
Funnily enough, no, Chris. Or Spanish flu.
No. I learned how tough Winston Churchill were and what a evil bastard Adolf Hitler, and that were it.
Yeah.
No grey areas.
Flexner was employed by the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, as were his brothers. I didn't even know he had loads of brothers until I looked into this. His brother, Simon, was a trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation. He was also a friend and advisor to John D. Rockefeller Jr. His other brother, Bernard Flexner, a prominent member of the Zionist Organization of America, served as counsel for the Zionist delegation to the Paris Peace Conference. That went well. And in 1925 was one of the founders of the Palestine Economic Corporation, otherwise known as PEC. He was also one of the founders of the Council on Foreign Relations. These are the credentials of some of the people and connections who worked at the Ministry of Aircraft Production with Leonard Huxley from 1940 to 45. Some interesting characters. Obviously, we had Dr. James Huxley who run the Barming Heath Lunatic Asylum. We've already mentioned that. But a couple of the interesting ones. You wouldn't recognise these names. One guy, Italian guy, Piero Ferrucci. Aldous Huxley's nephew, Piero Ferrucci, is a psychotherapist and philosopher. He graduated from the University of Torino in 1970. He was trained by Roberto Agostini, the founder of psychosynthesis. Psychosynthesis is based on Sigmund Freud's theory of the unconscious and addresses psychological distress in the intrapsychic, and interpersonal conflicts. It seems that the Ferruccis are related to the Akera family, which was Laura's maiden name. Laura married Aldous Huxley. Laura Huxley was his wife that gave him LSD before he died.
Right.
But her history is interesting and all, Chris, because she was like a virtuoso violin player at age 10, studying in Berlin, Paris, and Rome. And she earned a diploma in musical training at 17. She went on to study. So this is Aldous Huxley's wife, his second wife, who was related to these Ferruccis. She went to study at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, played in a major symphony orchestra, was invited to play before the Queen of Italy at the tender age of 14. This was circa around about 1925, and also performed at Carnegie Hall in her teens. She then left the concert stage to become a renowned psychotherapist and author.
Child genius,
yeah. One of the interesting parts of this, did you ever hear about this, Chris? The Huxley Family Foundation. The Huxley Family Foundation was created in 2007 by Aldous' second wife, who I just mentioned, Laura Arcaria Huxley, to continue the work of the deceased husband and the deceased Huxley family members and associates, as well as the work in association with Thomas Henry Huxley's X Club, which we'll come on to in a bit. Laura Huxley, born 1911, died 2007, was an American musician, as I mentioned, author and psychotherapist and lecturer. And she married Aldous Huxley, she was married to him from 1956 to his death in 1963. She was also a producer of documentary films and an assistant film editor at RKO. Laura Huxley appeared in Hoffman's Potion, The Early Years of LSD, a documentary from the National Film Board of Canada. I mean, these aren't just playing around with this stuff, are they, Chris? They're not major organisations. She was also an honoree of the United Nations Fellow of the International Academy of Medical Preventics and awarded the 1990 World Health Foundation for Development and Peace Prize. Didn't mention that she gave her husband, who were dying, massive doses of LSD. Most people would have been locked up for that.
Mm.
But this is publicised as it's normal.
Wrote a book about it.
Yeah. Interesting, the co-founders of the foundation were Laura and Aldous Huxley's nephew, Piero Ferrucci, I just mentioned, his two sons, Jonathan and Emilio, who are film producers, I seem to remember, and a man called Paul Fleiss. You recognise that name, Chris?
No.
You will do in a second. Paul Murray Fleiss, spelled F-L-E-I-S-S, so forgive me if I've pronounced it wrong. The name Fleiss caught my attention. Was he an Huxley descendant? It says so on the Huxley Wikipedia page.
Right.
The link on his name, it's on the Huxley family Wikipedia page. So who was Paul Fleiss? The link takes us to Paul Murray Fleiss, born 1933, there's numbers again, and died in 2014. He was an American pediatrician and author known for his unconventional medical views. He recommended, but did not insist upon, childhood jabs, and stated that he could be convinced either way as to whether HIV caused AIDS. Sounds like a reasonable bloke. In 1994, Fleiss pleaded guilty to conspiracy and bank fraud in relation to his daughter's prostitution ring. She was called Heidi Fleiss.
Oh, yeah, I remember her.
Remember Heidi Fleiss?
Yeah.
In 1994, Fleiss pleaded guilty to conspiracy. Heidi Fleiss was born in 1965. Is an American former madam. She ran an upscale prostitution ring based in Los Angeles and was often referred to as the Hollywood Madam.
I would hazard a guess that was some kind of sting operation.
Yeah, I think you could sort of guarantee that it was. Whether it was at first or not, it was certainly taken over. It's an interesting story, isn't it?
Getting all them Hollywood stars in the pocket.
I remember that book you lent me when we went to Malta going back 20 years ago. That producer,
Don Simpson, wasn't it?
Don Simpson, yeah.
And
He mentioned her in his
Bruckheimer.
book.
Yeah, that's where I knew about it. Yeah, Simpson and Bruckheimer. Simpson was Bruckheimer's the one who produced like Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff, but it used to be Simpson and Bruckheimer, didn't it?
Yeah. Didn't they do Beverly Hills Cop and stuff?
Yeah, a lot of that stuff, Top Gun and stuff like that. All those 80s.
They
basically had a template and they followed the template for every film. And you could take the template as Top Gun, following that, Flash Dance and things like that. All those 80s, person who comes good. They always had a mentor and they always came good.
Right. Yeah. Interesting story, this, though. And she got convicted, when did I say, 1995. And there were films made within months after, like Heidi Fleiss, Hollywood Madam, 1996, is a feature-length documentary film by Nick Broomfield. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
Which, again, you look at his films list, it was odd why would he make that film? Anyway, Broomfield was born in 1948, the son of photographer Morris Broomfield. Broomfield's archive, so his dad's archive, has been acquired by the Victorian and Albert Museum.
Right.
No plumbers here, Chris.
What else did Broomfield were famous for? He'd have a microphone and a big pair of headphones and a microphone on a boom.
Mic.
Yeah.
Right.
I can't remember which other documentaries he made now, but it'd be interesting to have a look.
Yeah. The documentary was co-funded by the BBC, HBO, CBC, which I think is Canadian broadcasting, and the German one called WDR.
So you would hazard a guess someone wanted that documentary made.
I think it were a warning.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it seemed.
You understand what I mean? I get what you mean. Yeah. They're publicising this Hollywood Madame, and anyone who went and saw this Madame's prostitute ring.
It reminded me of the Epstein stuff.
Yeah,
the black book that's never been published.
Yeah, never will be.
Yeah.
Did
it exist?
Well, again, like you say, a threat brought out just at the right time. And I think that Heidi Fleiss's, when she went through court, I think it was all publicised a bit like O.J. Simpson style, but not.
Wasn't Charlie Sheen involved as well?
Yeah, he rings a bell. And I think Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. I think they all were.
But didn't Robbie Downey Jr. go into some sort of rehabilitation?
I think a few times. Yeah, I think all kinds of things like that.
Yeah,
and then he had a resurgence with the Iron Man, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
when
he got out, yeah.
Ringing alarm bells.
What goes on behind these closed doors, man? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. So Heidi Fleiss subject to a 1996 made-for-TV movie entitled "The Good Doctor: The Paul Fleiss Story," in which Paul Fleiss was portrayed sympathetically as the victim of his daughter Heidi's machinations. But yeah, interesting. But she went to jail in 1994. She posted $1 million bail, and the trial began the same year. And she was convicted in May 1996. So basically, they're making a documentary in 1996, and she got convicted in May 1996. Oh no, it were overturned. So it was actually overturned, a bail, £1 million bail, and she was able to set a £200,000 bail. She was convicted on federal tax evasion in September 1996. So they'd already made a documentary about her.
Mm.
How's that work?
Ever contrived, or there was some real journalism going on where they shot straight over there and made the documentary.
Can't believe that if it were produced by BBC.
No, me neither.
Anyway, she served 20 months in California, and she was released in 1998. Fleiss's ring reportedly had numerous prominent and wealthy clients. When questioned by British television presenter Davina McCall, fantastic journalist, about revealing the names of her clients, she replied, It's not my style.
Again, like you say, it stinks of a threat, doesn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, the X Club. I wanted to add this bit in. The X Club was a dining club, a bit similar to the Lunar Club, the dining club of 9 men who supported the theories of natural selection and academic liberalism in the late 19th century. Thomas Henry Huxley was the initiator. He called the first meeting on the 3rd of November 1864. From November 1864 to March 1893, and its members are believed to have wielded much influence over scientific thought. The members of the club were George Busk, Edward Frankland, Thomas Archer Hurst, Joseph Dalton Hooker, Thomas Henry Huxley, Francis Galton, John Lubbock, Herbert Spencer, William Spottiswoode, and John Tyndall, united by a devotion to science, pure and free, untrammelled by religious dogmas. After Charles Darwin's Origin of Species was published in 1859, the men began working together to aid the cause for naturalism and natural history. Between the time of its inception in 1864 and its termination in 1893, the X Club and its members gained much prominence within the scientific community. I bet they did. Carried much influence over scientific thought. The X Club, I mean, the letter X obviously is raising its head with our friend Elon Musk again. Now.
Yeah. 6 Club.
Yeah, the X Club. 9 members. Yeah, but again, it says that this club was very influential in shaping the scientific landscape of late Victorian England.
So if we started a club up, would we reshape Victorian? Would we reshape up modern day England?
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't be allowed to unless they wanted you to.
You'd have no impact whatsoever, would you?
No, unless the system wanted you to have an impact.
It didn't matter what you were coming up with, would it?
No. Unless you had the financial backing or the intellectual backing, you would not have. Anyway, this is how powerful the Huxleys were. They were influential in setting up groups like this. On the Royal Historical Society website, royalhiscsoc.org, there's a blog called The Huxleys, A Revolution in How We See Ourselves. The society was founded and received its royal charter in 1868. In the middle and later 20th century, the RHS took on a more active role in representing the discipline and profession of history. What did that lady say about climate change regarding Google searches? We own the science. They could say we own the history, can't they?
Yeah.
We own the science. Can you remember that woman that came on and said, we own the science?
Well, they do own the science and the history.
Yeah. The RHS sprung from the Camden Society, another group. This is also the title of a lecture at the Royal Society, the Royal Historical Society, given by leading historian of science, Alison Bashford. She's joined by historian Thomas Dixon, so they're coming up to present date now, and writer Stuart Jeffries, to discuss the impact of 3 generations of Huxleys, exploring how the roots of the Huxley legacy reach deep into scientific and cultural conversations we are still having today. So this is taken from there. What I've just read there is taken from there. She wrote a book about the Huxleys, did Alison Bashford. She's a professor. Alison Bashford wrote a 2022 book entitled An Intimate History of Evolution, The Huxleys in Nature and Culture. On her wiki page, it says she edited a book called Contagion, Historical and Cultural Studies 2001, new edition, Contagion Epidemics, History and Culture from Smallpox to Anthrax. The lecture and book accepts that the Huxleys were at the epicenter of change for the last 150 years. Anyway, the blog reads, if I can get to it. Across the 19th and 20th centuries, the Huxley family reshaped how we think about humanity and our relationship with the natural world. Within a family of scientists, educators, novelists, mystics, and filmmakers, 2 men led the way. Darwin's bulldog, the zoologist T.H. Huxley, Thomas Huxley, and his grandson, an intellectual inheritor, the ecologist and conservationist Julian Huxley. From religion to genetics to human psychology, the Huxleys' impact was felt across some of the most controversial and significant topics of their day. In studies of the natural world, they contributed to the foundation of the new sciences of ecology and animal conservation. Adept at writing about themselves in painfully revealing honest and unprecedented ways, the family's lives, marriages, successes, and failures were also subject to their fascination with emotional, sexual, and psychological experience. As I said at the beginning, when we started, Chris, they never write about them having a negative effect or being part of a control group. It comes back to that 2020 thing where everything's inept and it just happens by accident.
Yeah, like the early eugenics thing, it just got out of control in America.
It's never written about by these people who are talking about this. It's an interesting chat. If you listen, there's a full podcast about them talking about it. All they ever talk about is, it's very woolly. They talk about, Julian Huxley was a man of his time, Thomas Huxley, saw the future. All this type of thing, weren't the great men? And
like that eugenics in America. You can look it up on Wikipedia. There's no one saying it was disgusting and it should have been. These people should have been tried for crimes against humanity. There's no discussion of that. It's just that we didn't really get it and we did a few bad stuff. Good was at heart of it, but it went a bit wrong, kind of thing.
Yeah. We made a couple of errors.
Yeah, but what they should be talking about is them numbers. They should be discussed on a daily. It should be discussed all the time what they were doing, and the fact that it influenced probably Nazi Germany to follow on from it.
Well, more than that, I would say every country. Well, again, every person we do research on or talk about, these influential people are either part of a family who was involved in eugenics. Like Susan Mickey, for argument's sake. Susan Mickey wrote a paper on how to get a perfect kid. This was done in the 1990s. It weren't done in 1890. They're involved in eugenics. Look at that Dominic Cummings' father-in-law. When he were asked asked up in Northeast about, was he the Duke of Wakefield or the Earl of Wakefield or something like that? He was asked about whether his family would have married into just normal sort of peasant class, and he sort of turned his. Can you remember that conversation? And he went, "Oh no, it just wouldn't. The ruling classes
out of the word.
Yeah,
it's unacceptable. Virtually.
Yeah, he did. I think he actually used them words, didn't he? He actually said it were unacceptable.
Which again just makes you realise they're operate under their own weird rules.
We're only really scratching around the edges in this episode, and there's so much more coming up in the future episodes. I bought a book a few months ago, Chris, that were published in 1901.
Right.
Written by Jared Huxley, called Genealogical Descent of the Huxley Family in the United States. Jared Huxley compiled the book from general and special histories, public records, and private writings. He wanted to study the origins of Huxley and where they went throughout the USA. In the book, in the 1901 book, no numbers there mean anything, Chris, written by Jared Huxley, it states, the family, or the Huxley family in England, were sufficiently ancient. The name Huxley can sometimes be used as the first name of English origin of a boy's name. One translation I found said Huxley can be described as meaning inhospitable place. Calling a child by the first name Huxley obviously honours writer Aldous Huxley and other members of the distinguished family. Most of us have heard of the Huxley name, mainly due to Aldous Huxley and his famous book Brave New World, and what this series is called after. But did you know that in Cheshire there is a hamlet called Huxley? It is a small rural village, a former parish, aka the manor of Huxley, with the residence being Huxley Hall. In Huxley Village, there is a moated manor house called Lower Huxley Hall, which dates from the late 15th century. In Jared's book from 1901, it reads, A part of the solid stone wall or walls of the old manor house still stand, and they are incorporated into the structure of a modern farmhouse. But no Huxley lives there. At present, that was 1901, the area is said to be about 1,500 acres. The Benedictine Abbey or monastery of St. Werburg, founded by Hugh Lupus, Earl of Chester, in 1070, was at Chester, obviously, and it received title to these lands with much other lands in the vicinity of Chester from William the Conqueror between 1066 and 1093. Huxley is not named in the Domesday Book, but he is said to be comprised under the name of Hodesleia, spelled Hodeslea, contained in the foundation charter of the Benedictine Abbey of St. Werburg, but omitted from enumeration of those estates in the Domesday Book. All present titles to the land in England start from the Domesday Book of William the Conqueror in 1066, and the new family and owner soon bear the name of his land, thus Richard de Huxley, simply meaning Richard of Huxley, i.e. Richard of land, or the land called Huxley. The growth in spelling the name has been from the Latin Hodeslea, as I mentioned a minute ago, to the English Hodesley, Huxley, and Huxley. So that's a bit of history there, Chris.
Yeah.
And how far it goes back, way back to William the Conqueror, as we find in a lot of this stuff goes that far back. And there's a bit more to it. So Huxley is a place name adopted by the ancient family that's translated to mean inhospitable place. In addition to the Earls of Chester, one of the threads running through many of these protagonists mentioned in this series, including Sir Julian and Aldous Huxley, have a lineage going back to Edward Plantagenet, aka Edward Windsor, aka Edward III. It turns out that Edward was also titled as Earl of Chester in 1312. In a letter I read from a book by Julian and Aldous' father, Leonard Huxley, called Life Letters of Thomas Huxley, Volume 1, it states, this proved to be from the manor of Huxley, or Hodeslea, whereof one Swanus, also called Swain, de Huckenall, of Huckenall, and Huxley, Cheshire, circa 1185, was Enfioft, which means, in ancient words, given land.
Enfioft.
By the abbot and the convent of St. Werburg, in the time of Richard I. Of the grandsons of this Swanus, the eldest kept the manor and the name of Huckenhull, or Hockenhull. This part of the family married into the de Pulfords from a place called Broxton Hundred, and the hundreds were how they divided the land up. So they had, that's how in ancient times, that's how they divided the lands up. There were loads of hundreds around Britain and north of England. Broxton Hundred in Cheshire, and 4 generations. Cecily de Huxley married Richard de Pulford of Eton in 1300. That's Eton, Eaton. Probably pronounced it more Yorkshire. Their son was Sir Nicholas de Eton of Arden, Warwickshire. He married into the house of Colville, or Colvin, which is an Anglo-Norman family in England, by marrying the daughter of Lord Colville of Bytham, of Castle Bytham in Lincolnshire. One of the family's most notable titles is the Barony of Colville of Castle Bytham. Isn't it interesting how a lot of these people, Chris, have obviously followed the Huxley name, but you don't realise where the sort of tentacles go. And we're going to find that out further on, probably in the next episode, when we find people who aren't actually called Huxley, like we did with the Fleiss lady, Heidi Fleiss, who seems to be related to the Huxleys in some way. Overlooking the village is an 11th century Norman castle mound. So this is Castle Bytham. The site of the castle in Saxon times was owned by Morcar, also known as Morkia, who was the brother of Eldgith, wife of King Harold. Now, I mentioned many of these characters in the ancestry of George Orwell, Eldgith and King Harold, and William d'Aubergine. 4th Earl of Arundel, are all relations of Orwell. So, who was then taught by Aldous Huxley at Eton. Bear in mind, we just mentioned a place called Eton, but that were Eaton, and shared the Edward III ancestry. So all these characters share the same lineage back or forward constantly.
Mm.
The de Pulfords became part of the Grosvenor family that is now the Duke of Westminster. Net worth about £12 billion. Is one of the richest people in Britain. The Huxleys are married into the Grosvenor family as well. Another house called Higher Huxley Hall dates from at least the 13th century. Higher Huxley Hall is also a former manor house, which later became a 5-star hotel. From the website, thehuxleystory.com, an excerpt from a blog article read, "The Huxleys have been called a Cheshire family, and family history dictates that their earliest recorded origins are with the manor of Hodesley, southeast of Cheshire, south of Liverpool. The manor area is now the hamlet of Huxley, where the Higher Huxley Hall and Lower Huxley Hall remain. The family eventually populated nearby villages such as Eccleston. Higher Huxley Hall was once in the possession of the Cholmondeley family. The Cholmondeley family are aristocrats. The current holder is the 7th Marquess David George Philip Cholmondeley. The 7th Marquess is a descendant of Sir Robert Walpole, 1st Earl of Oxford, who was the first Prime Minister of Great Britain, and a descendant of King Edward III, just like Julian and Aldous, Charles Darwin, George Orwell, the Bushes, yada, 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 yada. David George Philip Cholmondeley inherited Houghton Hall, a grand stately home in Norfolk where they now live, or he lives, styled as Viscount Malpas from birth. He was styled Viscount Malpas from birth until 1968, and subsequently now is known as the Earl of Rock Savage.
That's a name, isn't it?
And he's now, he's a British peer, filmmaker, who acted as Lord Chamberlain in the UK from 1990 to 2022. The family seats are Houghton Hall in Norfolk and Cholmondeley Castle, which is surrounded by 7,500 acres or 3,000 hectare estate near Malpas, Cheshire. In a genealogy search, the Cholmondeley family from Ilchester, Somerset, circa 1677, was one of the founding settlers of the colony of Rhode Island and Providence plantations. He and his sons were among the wealthiest people in the colony. Does that go back to Fritz Springmeier's?
It seems like I was thinking that when you were on about the earlier bit. How did they get even the Doomsday? I won't pretend to know the history. The Doomsday thing, was that a reset? Was that this when they divvied out land to people, didn't they? After
I would have thought it was. We've invaded. Now we're going to draw new owners of the land.
Owners of land. Yeah.
Which basically was what a plantation did in Barbados, because they're obviously, or in the New World, America, or whatever.
Yeah,
because there were obviously natives there.
Oh, you're on about where they divvied up the fur trade and the train trade and the gold and all that.
Exactly. Yeah.
It does make you. I know it's a really silly thing to say, but they have these manor houses with all them hectares of land, 3,000, 7,500 acres. I know it sounds really stupid and really simple, but the whole system's wrong, isn't it, really? Because then you've got someone sleeping in a bush shelter in central Cambridge freezing the tits off.
Well,
I don't know what the answer is.
Well, no, there is no answer, and it's a subject for another day. However, it does what you've just said there does explain Brave New World, the book, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, the families of old money, aren't they? Like in America, those families, they're not rich. They've just got endless money. They never, and then the next generation gets to the next generation.
And the odd thing is, right, of that, 7,500 acres, they probably run charities trying to help these people, when in reality, it's just doomed to failure, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, most of these manor houses now, I've been to a few, actually, over the last few years with a nipper. And when my missus was looking for a venue for work, and I actually asked the people when you get there, because these beautiful manor houses and people can go and look around them. Went to the one where they filmed Batman, actually. There's 2 manor houses near here where they filmed Batman. And I said, wait, I always ask, where do the family, do they still live here and stuff? And they said they live in like one room in the house. So you've got all this ornate stuff, and then they've pushed themselves into one room. And then the way they survive is by people going and looking around it.
Well, I look at them families, right, and they're worth literally hundreds and hundreds of millions. They can't even put prices on them because they can't price the paintings.
Yeah.
You
couldn't price that building, could you?
No, so you can't price the building, but you can't. The paintings are probably worth more than the building. Imagine trying to value those paintings.
But then, because there's no slaves as there used to be, or really cheap labour, they can't maintain these buildings without letting people wandering around them because it'd be so expensive to maintain now, won't they?
So it gets me where a lot of them are basically keepers of the house, if you like. That they're not. It doesn't actually, because they can't sell it. When have you heard anybody sell one of these places recently?
They've generally got stories saying that they nearly lost it because they couldn't keep
it.
They've
turned it into a zoo, or
it's like farms now, isn't it? Where the farmers markets, the what is it?
Which says it means something
shop.
else. To me, it means something else. These families are watching this, and the status that this guy, one of these guys here, what is it? If we look at William Henry Hugh Cholmondeley, 3rd Marquis of Cholmondeley, born 1800, died 1884. That guy there was like I call it a gatekeeper, but for want of a better phrase, it's something else in it. And it takes me back to that Transformers film where Anthony Hopkins was a guy who lived in a stately home. But he had secret passages that went, and he had meetings with government, even though they were just Baron such and such or Earl such and such. They all meet up and they actually make decisions behind the scenes.
That doesn't happen, far.
No.
1884 is a number that comes up a lot as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah. Anyway, that guy there, he was married to, she was called Charlotte, and she was the 3rd Duke of Ancaster and Kesteven daughter. And she married into US arm of the political military Arnold family when she married the Reverend Edward Gladwin Arnold, who was the grandson 7 times of William the Settler Arnold, one of the founding settlers of the colony of Rhode Island.
That's one of the spring-mine names, isn't it? I think.
Well, I think Arnold is.
Yeah, I think it is. It's one of them around there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to read the book. Yeah, read the book again. I think it's one of those minor name, not a minor name, but
there's the main ones, and then there's offshoots, isn't there?
Yes, yeah.
Arnold definitely rings a bell for that.
And it's quite an established name in politics, is Arnold in America, and obviously the plantations and other stuff. And over here, Aldous Huxley's mother was Julia Arnold, so he's an Arnold. So there's 2 offshoots. There's a British, looks like the Huxleys we've been talking about. There's a British and a American version of them. But they're all like governors and what have you. The Cholmondeleys also descend from both the Rothschild family and the Sassoon family. The Sassoon family are known as the Rothschilds of the East. But nobody ever knows of these people. It's like the Wallenbergs. Nobody ever knows of these people. That's what gets me. They're called the Rothschilds of the East. They're called the Rothschilds of Scandinavia or something. And yet, nobody really knows them. But they know the Rothschilds. I wonder if Vidal Sassoon was related to them.
That's what I was thinking. It's the only Sassoon you've ever heard of, isn't it?
Yeah. He was of Ashkenazi descent.
Yeah.
And Sephardic descent. I mean, my view is on all this stuff, we're seeing the sort of ancient matrix out there. There's something in this, not just about bloodline, but about that individual person that's chosen. That Damien thing that you talk about, that's chosen to do a specific thing, a role that they're playing. The interesting thing is we shall come across the Cholmondeley family again in this presentation or in the next episode. I'll just mention it. Elspeth Huxley wrote a book called White Man's Country, Lord Delamere and the Making of Kenya. And it was about Hugh Cholmondeley, a.k.a. Baron Delamere. The current Baron is Hugh George Cholmondeley, 5th Baron Delamere, born 1939, and still owns vast land, 48,000 acres in Soyasambu Ranch in Kenya. Over 50 mammal species are found on Soyasambu, where there are 11 Rothschild giraffes, which were translocated especially to the Soyasambu ranch from Lake Nakuru Park in 1995. What's all that about?
It's disgusting, isn't it?
48,000 acres, Chris. Hey, look, I'm all for people doing well and stuff like that. I've no issue with any of that, right? None whatsoever.
Yeah, but Baron Delamere shouldn't own 48,000 acres in Kenya.
No. That were taken at the with a rifle, wasn't it?
Of
Like
course.
most of this land is. Like
All of
most
it.
of the land is taken with a rifle and a bullet or a sword.
But if you don't belong in Kenya, you stand out. If you're a white guy in Kenya who owns 48,000.
He's got 11 Rothschild giraffes, though. Huxley family links to Huxley village. Their descendants and relatives are part of a mixed in with the elite families of the area, like the Grosvenors, spread far and wide into America and the Arnold family. All this type of mixing is, I find, very interesting. And with hindsight and 2020 vision, we're looking at a family who are ingrained into British society. In fact, it looks like they were deliberately planted and used to change the very fabric of his lives in the 20th century, starting in the mid-1800s. This family dispersed far and wide and achieved their academic mission or goals. My view is that they're like the modern-day Luciferian headliners like Leigh Kurzweil, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Yuval Harari, who Chris mentioned earlier, who are today's voices for the Satanists. The Huxleys were, in fact, doing the same job, but in a quieter, more behind-the-scenes, subtle kind of way. Do you think that, Chris?
Strange, though, isn't it? It's like they knew from day one how to pan out Europe, if you know what I mean, and then America. Do you know what I mean? To set it all, set all the groundwork, and know they weren't going to see anything in their lifetime, but generation after generation. Some bloody
As Alan Watt said, like the UN. I mean, the Huxleys were part of setting up UNESCO, which is part of the UN. They know that they're planning for 50, 100 years ahead of time.
And then do you reckon they sack it and just move it all somewhere else? Like from Egypt to, Greece, Egypt, Rome. Do you think they just sack it? And then
I suppose look what we're seeing now.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It looks like they're going to sack the system of now and move it somewhere else.
Yes.
Is that why there's all those empty cities in China and where is it? He's in somewhere in Eastern Europe as well.
Like them ghost cities.
Yeah. I think there's one in Kazakhstan, isn't there?
Is there?
Like it looks like a future city with no one there.
Or it looks like somewhere they built thinking there were going to be people there.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Is the system going to shift again from Europe and England and America over to somewhere else?
But I mean, how many of these people, like I don't know, Galileo and all these people, were telling the future, like the Huxleys were? They were, these characters exist in every sort of generation, don't they?
But again, is he? If you think like 1984 and Brave New World, is that to manifest it? You're putting it in the head of all these kids at school. You know what? Those books are still in every school in England for a reason. And is it so that the kids are every kid's reading it? Every kid's reading it. Everyone talks about it. We still talk about it. Yes. Is that to manifest their vision? Are we manifesting their vision for them?
Probably. Buying into the what would it
just by reading it and by mentally visualizing it, you could be manifesting it, couldn't it? Yeah. Blooming magic, isn't it?
But what was it that Aldous Huxley said, that technology based, the more we become technological, the further more control we have to take us backwards. Which is what's happening, isn't it? Intelligence is dropping, but yet there's more technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ability to question has just fallen through the floor. Nobody questions anything anymore.
You can't, you're not allowed, are you?
No.
And in the last few years, it's just gone insane.
Yeah. Even more so.
And even we're getting used to it, using code words. I mean,
to speak on YouTube and stuff.
What world are we living in?
I know. What are we living in when you've got to say 91 Divok or
in Britney Spears?
Yeah, Britney Spears. Are you going? Who didn't go to a Britney Spears concert?
It's insane, isn't it? I mean, I know we know it is, and everyone who's listening knows it is. But when you actually stop and think again, even in the last 10 years,
before 2020, you didn't have to talk like this, did you? I remember you sending me a podcast by Crow going
Right.
back when he first started up.
Yeah.
There were Crow, Jason, and Wayne McCroy on it. Yeah?
Right.
And they were calling jabs sharp sticks.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And halfway through it, they sort of went, bad enough of this childlike behaviour. Right?
Because you were trying to get it on YouTube, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And that was, what was that? 2017, 2018, something like that. Probably maybe a bit before 2016. Something.
That was one of them. There's like 3 subjects you couldn't discuss even before the previous nonsense.
Jabberoonis,
the Jewish thing,
the Holocaust type stuff. Yeah.
Anything going against the narrative about World War II, basically, you can't go against. And what was the other one? Any cure for the
Big C.
Big C. Yeah. Can't talk about that. But now,
then it went from that. It went to false flags.
Yeah. You couldn't question them because you're upsetting everybody.
Yeah.
And now you can't mention
Oh, look what's happened to Richard.
You can't say that bloke's got a pair of tits.
Yeah, that's how far we've moved on or backwards. From technology, as Aldous Huxley said.
Yeah.
The Huxleys were held up as futuristic prophets, but at that time we were completely unaware they were leading us into the dark abyss we find ourselves into today. The first Huxley of influence was Thomas Henry Huxley, who was a classic eugenicist and helped change the views held at the time from humans being created from a creator god to humans happening by chance and evolving from apes, which then later gave birth to the primordial soup nonsense. We will go into more detail about Thomas Huxley in another episode, but just to give us an idea of how influential he was, in a Guardian story published in November 2010, the headline read, "Great Dynasties of the World, the Huxleys." Great Dynasties of the World. That's not just Aldous Huxley and his Brave New World.
Keeping the name alive, isn't it, the Guardian? Just keeping the whole family alive.
In a famous essay first published in 1955, the historian Noel Annan attempted to describe the complex set of kinship relationships that bound together the great thinkers and scientists of the late Victorian England. These great families formed what Annan called intellectual aristocracy, which is what we've been talking about all through this, who bequeathed to their descendants not money or titles, but rather some trait of personality, some tradition of behaviour, which did not perish with the passing of the years. Preeminent among these high-minded, intermarrying, multi-generational magnificos were the Macaulays, the Trevelyan's, the Arnolds, and perhaps most extraordinary of all, the Huxleys. Okay, just on a slight detour, about some additional information about the man who wrote the original article we were just talking about. And this will give us some insight as to how deeply controlled the information we're given is and how much change the Matrix has on history. Here's another change agent, another academic Mr. Smith. Noel Gilroy Annan, a.k.a. Lord Annan, a.k.a. Baron Annan OBE, author and academic, is no ordinary historian. Lord Annan was a British military intelligence officer, and during his military career he rose to the rank of colonel. His best-known essay is The Intellectual Aristocracy, that we just highlighted there, and it showed that the web of kinship that united British intellectuals like Darwin, the Huxleys, the Macaulays, the Trevelyan's, etc., in the 19th and 20th centuries. In the 1930s, he was a member of the secret Cambridge Apostles, a secret debating society whose members included Guy Burgess, who we've mentioned in previous parts of this series, and a chap called Michael Straight, who later became spies for the Soviet Union. In October 1940, he entered officer training. In January 1941, he was commissioned into the Intelligence Corps and posted to MI-14, a precursor to MI-6. MI-14, or British Intelligence Section 14, was a department of the British Directorate of Military Intelligence. It was posted to the Joint Intelligence Staff in the War Cabinet, which was located with Winston Churchill in his bunker. In 1944, he was transferred to Paris to become the French liaison officer with the British military intelligence, later becoming a senior officer in the political division of the British Control Commission in Germany after the war. After World War II, Lord Annan became director of the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden. He also became chairman of the Board of Trustees of the National Gallery, a trustee of the British Museum, and president of the London Library. He also sat on other government bodies such as the Public Schools Commission and private bodies, notably the Gulbenkian Foundation. The Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation, commonly referred to simply as the Gulbenkian Foundation, is a Portuguese institution dedicated to the promotion of the arts, the philanthropy, science and education, and who better to have as a trustee or a member of the board than an intelligence officer. It was founded, it's one of the world's wealthiest charitable foundations. The Gulbenkian Foundation was founded in 1956 according to the last will and testament of Calouste Sarkis Gulbenkian, a Portugal-Iranian oil magnate. The foundation has a 3.9 billion endowment, that was in 2017 as well, and a 170 million revenue turnover. Gulbenkian was linked to many of the major oil players and banking elite, like the Baring family and the Rothschild families via Shell Oil. Back to Annan, and in April 1974, Lord Annan headed up the Annan Committee of the Future of Broadcasting. That was established to discuss the United Kingdom broadcasting industry, including new technologies and their funding, the role and funding of the BBC, Independent Broadcasting Authority and programme standards. This just highlights we see another intelligence asset in charge of writing history, controlling the arts, and heading up the future of the mind control broadcasting. Lord Annan was another academic Manchurian candidate. I find it amazing that these people are just sort of put into the very nondescript families, aren't you know, like Elon Musk now is world famous. And Aldous Huxley is world famous. I'm not saying he's not, but when you see how many people become zoologists and have MBEs, or they're given Nobel prizes, or they're some kind of botanist, or they're doing something with inventing theories about how muscles work. These are all Huxleys. Or they're inventing radar, or they're inventing the BBC World Service, or
well, we have it in his head that you've got to be famous to be known, and you know, but it's not. I mean, Elon Musk's famous now because fame travels so fast, doesn't it? I suppose compared to their days.
And he pushed out as what they call it, not RoboCop, Iron Man.
Yeah, he's been pushed out to do loads of stuff.
I mean, the least looking Iron Man character in the world is some geek in it who's had a hair transplant and his cheeks made to look like an hamster.
Has he had work on his cheeks? Has he?
Well, he's had something done, hasn't he? Botox or some sort of work. Well, look at that picture of him from early 2000s where he had a bald head here.
Yeah.
He didn't even have 3 strands.
No.
Where he was picking his McLaren up. Anyway. Another link to Huxley's is Sir George Lothian Trevelyan, 4th Baron, eldest son of Sir Charles Trevelyan, born into a liberal aristocratic family. Family legend traced their ancestry to Sir Trevelyan, one of King Arthur's knights, who swam across on horseback when the legendary land of Lyonesse sank. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it doesn't matter if they've written it into legend, they want you to believe it's true. The family kept 3 houses year-round. Wallington in Northumberland, which the family owned since 1777, Welcome House in Warwickshire, and a townhouse in Westminster. You need a townhouse in Westminster. The family estates comprised of more than 11,000 acres. Plenty of deer on there. In 1942, after hearing a lecture given by Dr. Walter Stein, a student of Rudolf Steiner, Trevelyan discovered a spiritual worldview. During his lifetime, he explored beliefs in angels, the calming effects of crystals, and the power of ley lines, alongside organic farming and communal living. So George Trevelyan founded the Findhorn Foundation, a Scottish charitable trust registered in 1972 and formed by the spiritual community at the Findhorn Eco Village, one of the largest international communities in Britain. Findhorn Eco Village has been awarded UN Habitat Best Practice designation from the United Nations Centre of Human Settlements and regularly holds seminars for CIFAL. Findhorn, a United Nations Institute for Training and Research. The foundation has been called a spiritual utopian community. The activities include campaigning for local purchasing or stealing, public education on nutrition and certification of organic food, and against intensive farming, co-founded by Lady Evelyn Barbara Balfour, OBE, niece of the former Prime Minister Earl Arthur J. Balfour. The very Balfour, as in the Balfour Agreement, which gave Palestine to the Rothschilds when he was Foreign Secretary. So I have two links to Julian and Aldous there. First, via the Trevelyan's link to the UN, and next, Trevelyan was prominent, that Trevelyan who I mentioned, in the New Age movement. As we know, Aldous basically started the human potential movement that arose out of the counterculture, or that started the counterculture of the 1960s. He was definitely part of the New Age movement. In fact, I'd say he was one of the inventors of the New Age movement. Yeah. Do you know what I found with the Huxleys? They were starters of a lot of things. Mm. You know, somebody invents something like a vacuum cleaner, for argument's sake, like Hoover. But they were starters of things.
Movements.
Like flying dinosaurs.
Yeah, new theories and movements. Yeah.
UNESCO, where they're tying all the land up. The World Wildlife Foundation. All these things. Transhumanism. Agnosticism. You will own nothing and be happy. That's what it reminds me of. The movement takes the human potential movement takes its premise from the belief that through the development of their human potential, people can experience a life of happiness, creativity and fulfillment, and that such people will direct their actions within society towards assisting others to release their potential. You will own nothing and be happy.
Useless bastard.
Yeah. Isn't it weird how they started all this stuff up and none of it's ever charities and things like that? Name me a charity that's succeeded. Name me these types of things that's ever succeeded.
Yeah. They're just there to stop natural progression, aren't they?
Yeah. Aldous Huxley gave lectures on the human potential movement at the Esalen Institute in the early 60s. All sounds very positive, doesn't it? What went wrong? His writings and lectures on the mystical dimensions of psychedelics and on what he called the perennial philosophy were foundational. Moreover, his call for an institution that could teach the non-verbal humanities and the development of the human potentialities functioned as the working mission statement for the early Esalen Institute. And that's the link back to Huxley. As we know, the human potential movement was a Tavistock CIA operation set up as far back, when you think about it, as the early 1900s.
Yeah.
We're coming to more or less the end of this last 10 minutes anyway of this. I'm just going to venture off into that area. And I found some interesting things about the human potential movement. And some stuff people have already know, but it's just more to tie it into this. We mentioned the Esalen Clinic in episode 2 of this series. Went into a bit of detail about people that founded it and what have you in their backgrounds. Hunter S. Thompson were a security guard there, if you remember, Chris.
Yeah.
Off his napper with a gun. A lot of people went here. The Human Potential Movement, or HPM, arose out of the counterculture of the 60s. Tavistock and the CIA were heavily involved in the setup and distribution of this ideology. The Esalen Institute, commonly called Esalen, is a non-profit American retreat center and international community in Big Sur, California, which focuses on humanistic alternative education. And it played a key role in the HPM beginning in the 1960s. It was founded by Michael Murphy and Dick Price, as we mentioned in episode 2. Their intention was to support alternative methods for exploring human consciousness, what Aldous Huxley described as human potentialities. In 1979, Esalen began the Soviet-American Exchange Program, later renamed Track 2, an Institute for Citizen Diplomacy. So we've got an institute here that's non-for-profit that openly tells people to take LSD, and in the middle of the Cold War, they're doing a US-Soviet exchange program.
There is no countries fire.
No, no borders, just some sort of make-believe structure.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? The more of this stuff you go through, the more the more I confirm it to myself. That's what I think. Anyway. Maybe
Well, I mean, yeah, the more I confirm. I mean, 1979 was like bang smack. I know 10 years later, the so-called wall fell down and all this sort of stuff,
Yeah.
but
banging
this
the
was
Cold War, though, wasn't it?
This was Cold War. In 1979, we were told we could be nuked at any second.
Well, that went right into 80s.
Yeah.
When the war came down, that was quite a sudden movement, 4-year period, wasn't it? Where it all went.
Perestroika and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Gorbachev, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. The initiative came at the time when the Cold War tensions were at the peak. So it's an initiative now. So who set that up then? 2 aging hippies who decided, let's contact Russia. It reminds me of that story where Elon Musk, after he'd sold his PayPal and wanted to set SpaceX up, flew to Russia to buy some intercontinental ballistic missiles so he could get the technology to... Because that's what you do, innit? You just go to Russia and
That's
buy
how
some...
things work,
Yeah. ICBMs. A couple of ICBMs, please. Yeah. And a I Heart Moscow t-shirt. We're meant to believe all this stuff. Meant to believe all this stuff, Chris, aren't we? The programme was credited with substantial success in fostering peaceful private exchanges between citizens of the superpowers. In 1989, Esalen Institute brought future president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, on his first trip to the US. Although Yeltsin did not visit the Esalen facility at Big Sur, Esalen arranged meetings for him with President George H.W. Bush. So now the US diplomatic arm.
Yeltsin was the drunk guy, wasn't
Yeah, he with him were always pissed, wasn't
he? Yeah,
he were always vodka'd up, wasn't he?
Yeah, didn't get off his plane and stuff, did he?
Yeah. I mean, how is this possible? How is an institute, that'd be like, me and you set an institute up and we ring Israel and Palestine up and say, come over here and just meet over here. We'll sort it all out with you. You meant to believe that they just picked phone up and just spoke to Boris Yeltsin and told him to come over to meet George Bush.
Well, if Nixon can ring Neil Armstrong on Moonfire, anything's possible.
Yeah, but he had that phone, didn't he? He had a special phone, Chris. You're forgetting that, aren't you?
All right.
You're forgetting he had a special phone. Esalen also brought many other leaders in business and government to the US. The Esalen Institute was based on the Trabuco College, an American retreat centre founded by Gerald Hurd, who we're going to go into in a minute, and Aldous Huxley, early in the human potential movement near the community of Trabuco Canyon in California, which Gerald Hurd, I believe, owned. And come back to him. Although it operated only from 1942 to 1949, it is cited as an inspiration for the Esalen Institute and is now owned and operated by the Ramakrishna Monastery, by the Vandata Society of Southern California. I'm sure that was a society that were worth something ridiculous like $5 billion.
Right.
But this thing that Aldous Huxley set up that apparently started the human potential movement was set up during World War II. Right in the middle, 1942 is right in the middle of the World War II. That's so 20 years in advance, over 20 years in advance of when the psychedelic in 1960s started. Gerald Hurd, called Henry Fitzgerald Hurd, he was a British-born American historian, science writer and broadcaster, public lecturer, educator and philosopher. and he wrote over 35 books. He sold millions of copies as well of his philosophical books. Hurd was a guide and mentor to numerous well-known people from the 1940s through the 60s, including, and you've probably never heard of these people, I hadn't until I looked at this, Henry Luce and Claire Booth Luce. She was an American writer, politician, US ambassador. Henry was the founder of Time, Life, Fortune, and Sports Illustrated magazines.
Very influential, covering everything there as well, even up to sport.
Henry has been called the most influential private citizen in America of his day.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
It has been reported that their marriage, this Henry and Claire's, was sexually open. Have we heard that before?
Yeah.
Bear in mind, she was US ambassador at a time when being sexually open was frowned upon, I would have thought.
Yeah, unless he was homosexual.
Well, again, that's another thread that runs through this. Claire Luce's lovers included Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy, Randolph Churchill, General Lucien Truscott, who was a member of the CIA and a representative of theirs in Germany, General Charles Willoughby. I don't know if he's part of the Willoughby family, Hollow Willoughby, but would it surprise you? He was chief of military intelligence during World War II and the Korean War. And Roald Dahl.
God, you got about a bit, didn't
you? His books, but Roald Dahl's books have sold more than 300 million copies, Chris.
And continually pushed as well. We've talked about that before.
And Dahl has been called one of the greatest storytellers for children of the 20th century. Hence why he's been pushed. He became a fighter pilot and subsequently an intelligence officer, rising to the rank of acting wing commander. In 1942, Dahl met British novelist C.S. Forester, who was also working for the Ministry of Information, where we heard that before, and was writing propaganda for the Allied cause, mainly for American consumption. Later, Dahl worked with other such well-known British officers, such as Ian Fleming, who we showed probably had MK Ultra treatment. Can you remember that, Chris, when he was younger? During the war, Dahl supplied intelligence from Washington. Dahl also supplied intelligence to Canadian spy master Sir William Samuel Stevenson and his organisation known as the British Security Coordination, which was part of MI6, as a huge secret agency of nationwide news manipulation and black propaganda. So you've got the biggest storyteller of children's books, 300 million books sold, and he worked in World War II as a British propagandist.
Still going strong.
Yeah, still
just made another Willy Wonka film, haven't they?
Have they? The British Security Coordination influenced news coverage in the US. Nah, I doubt it. They don't do it like that. Not in World War II. It was so pure and innocent and homely.
Good against evil.
Yeah. The BSC operated from room, wait for it, 3603 at the Rockefeller Center. Dahl was part of the plan developed by spy master Sir William Stevenson, codename Intrepid. Dahl was instructed to romance Claire Luce, who, this is not a bad name for her, is it, that? Who was 13 years his senior, to see if, with the right kind of encouragement, she could warm to the British position. And she did.
Right kind of encouragement.
Yeah, right kind of position. Just like James Bond.
Think she's some kind of spy then, huh?
Well, she was an American ambassador, so I would have thought she was a spy. I think a lot of these, they were taking LSD with this Gerald Hurd. Gerald Hurd was the son of an Anglo-Irish clergyman and studied history and theology at the University of Cambridge. In 1929, he edited The Realist, a short-lived monthly magazine of scientific humanism. Its sponsors included H.G. Wells, and H.G. Wells's mentor, remember, was T.H. Huxley, Arnold Bennett, and Julian Huxley and Aldous Huxley. In 1927, Hurd began lecturing for the South Place Ethical Society that was based in London at Conway Hall. And it's thought to be the oldest surviving 3-4 organisation in the world and is the only remaining ethical society in the United Kingdom. It now advocates secular humanism and is a member of Humanists International. which, incidentally, Julian Huxley, or Sir Julian Huxley, was the first president of Humanists International. He was also one of the co-founders, along with Jacob Philip or Jaap van Praag, a Dutchman, and Harold Blackham, a British humanist, philosopher, writer and educationalist, who has been described as the progenitor of modern humanism in Britain. Harold Blackham co-founded the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. During this period, Hurd was science commentator for the BBC for 5 years. Bisexual Jean Connolly moved in an entourage of young male couples that included Peter Watson, Denham Fouts, who was a high-end rent boy who turned up dead in his bath, I do believe we reported in an earlier episode in Huxley's Brave New World Order. And you maybe remember the name Connolly. It was Cyril who, with Peter Watson, a wealthy English art collector and benefactor, funded the literary magazine Horizon, edited by Cyril Connolly. Horizon seems to have been one of those intelligence fronts. Cyril Connolly was Cyril Connolly, MBE, who owned Clontarf Castle in Ireland. From 1926, Hurd's life companion was Christopher Wood, who, thanks to an inheritance, was also Hurd's financial supporter. The relationship lasted until Hurd's death in 1971. Hurd was also very good friends with the before-mentioned Aldous Huxley. Humphrey Osmond, an English psychiatrist who came up with the phrase psychedelic. Hurd was also friends with CIA asset and psychedelic pioneer Alfred Hubbard. If you're watching this, I'm going to be showing a picture now that shows these three from the 1950s. I feel that we're seeing the Tavistock operation in this picture. Gerald Hurd also took interest in parapsychology and was a member of the Society for Psychical Research. Remember we went into that earlier? So a lot of these people are into this. Its stated purpose is to understand events and abilities commonly described as psychic or paranormal. It describes itself as the first society to conduct organised scholarly research into human experiences that challenge contemporary scientific models. I would say that what most of this stuff that we look at works off is this type of occult type learning.
Well, it was very fashionable among the elites, wasn't it? And they're going from Victorian times up to now, up to then. You have to wonder, did they find something? Then all of a sudden it's not fashionable anymore.
Well, I think they found something and went beyond that. That's hence why CERN, going back to when we talked to allegedly Dave, and he was saying that they've obviously been either given or learnt some information, and they're summoning
is what we've talked about with the iPad and stuff, and technology that just came out of nowhere with no one's name on it. It didn't make any sense, did it?
Nobody took credit for it.
Yeah.
But when you think about in a world where everybody takes credit, like they've given Mark Zuckerberg credit for Facebook, they've given Elon Musk credit for PayPal. Even the guys that invented PayPal have never claimed credit. They've allowed Musk to claim credit for it.
Yeah.
How's that work?
Yeah. And now...
And Tesla.
We've got the sky mirrors that we're all carrying around with us, and no one's ever claimed invention of that, have they?
No. This Gerald Hurd, who was Aldous Huxley's mentor, I believe, was homosexual, and his mentor, possibly stroke lover, was Sir Horace Curzon Plunkett. I mean, Curzon's an aristocratic name, isn't it? Younger brother of John Plunkett, 17th Baron of Dunsany. Gerald Hurd was his personal secretary. That's what they call him in them days. So Horace Plunkett left him a sizable inheritance when Plunkett died in 1932. And that's how he bought that retreat that him and Aldous Huxley set up.
Right.
Which also then leads you to wonder about Aldous Huxley, doesn't it? Going back to what we said about George Orwell as well. I know Aldous was married twice and George Orwell married twice, but it seems there's a bit of swinging going on. In 1954, Hurd tried mescaline, and in 1955 at LSD. He felt that, used properly, these had strong potential to enlarge man's mind by allowing a person to see beyond his ego. In August 1956, Alcoholics Anonymous founder Bill Wilson first took LSD under Hurd's guidance with the officiating presence of psychiatrist Sidney Cohen, then with the California Veterans Administration Hospital. Who was it who, what was it? It wasn't Leary, was it? Who was that guy that drove around in the bus? Forgot his name now. Can you remember who I mean?
Yeah.
And he part of MK Ultra at that Veterans Hospital. Ken Kesey, he volunteered to have MK Ultra, to be an MK Ultra whatever candidate. Sidney Cohen was in the book about Manchurian candidates. He helped with some of the information. I think it was Stephen Marks who wrote the Manchurian candidate book. Anyway, he gave information for that book.
Right.
Now, he didn't say he were part of MK Ultra. He just said he had information anyway. But given what the MK Ultra operation was using LSD and it was used at veterans hospitals, I'm not saying this Sidney Cohen was part of it, but you sort of leads you down that road, doesn't it? In the late 50s, Heard worked with Sidney Cohen to introduce intelligent, adventurous people to LSD, including film director, screenwriter, and actor John Huston.
Right.
John Huston was used in World War II to make US Army propaganda films.
And did he make loads of cowboy films as well?
Yeah. Also, TV radio personality Steve Allen. They're talking here in the 1950s here. Cohen also provided LSD, or the LSD used by Aldous Huxley on his deathbed experience, and advocated LSD's research, particularly for the terminally ill. Now, what are we seeing now with what they're pushing? Do you think that's going to be a thing where you're terminally ill, we can finish you off, but we're going to give you a trip before you go? Read your mind. Heard was also responsible for introducing the then unknown Houston Smith to Aldous Huxley. This is another character called Houston, but it's his first name. The meeting with Huxley led eventually to Smith's connection to Timothy Leary. In 1958, Smith was appointed Professor of Philosophy at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he remained until 1973. While there, he participated in experiments with psychedelics with Professors Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, conducted at the Harvard University. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Does make you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, I know we're called nutters for talking about MK Ultra, but and these experiments, but they've admitted it. It's in history. And if they were doing it in the 50s, imagine where it is now, 75 years later.
Yeah. Well, it comes back to what that Professor Giordano says. They'll infiltrate you. They'll give you small amounts that your body will accept. And over time, you'll just be stark raving bonkers or totally submissive, which is what MK Ultra was about, wasn't it?
They were doing the sharp shock version.
Yes.
We've been delivered the slow, brave new world version.
Yeah, they were given the totalitarian version. We've been given
experimenting, weren't they?
Yeah.
Is what they were doing.
We've been given it in a technological way. They were using a blunt instrument, weren't they? Just seeing what happened.
Yeah.
Now they know what happens. So who knows what's in water? Who knows what's in the air? Who knows what were in them arm spears? What I do know is that people don't think like they used to do. I mean, you've got to be careful as well, because I'm not saying everybody are highly intelligent back in the day. But when I read books like that one I've just read in 1901 by Jared Huxley, and I presume he was well educated. And also, I was reading a book just yesterday, and it's about the Somme. And this was a private writing it. And he wrote it like he could write a novel.
I was just thinking that. I remember there was a comedian did a skit about that, saying he'd read some from Civil War in America, to his girlfriend or something. I can't wait to get home to my beautiful, and we'll get my, written like bloody Shakespeare. And then he read some out from like Iraq. No disrespect to anyone who's 7 in army, but it's like, it is hot as fuck over here.
Yeah.
My underpants are soaking,
Yeah. Well, this guy were writing about in a trench about a beetle that were crawling up his top, and how he wrote it was like poetry. And then he were writing about ants, how they work their way up your leg and come out of your top of your shirt and stuff like that, looking lost and surprised that they've come out, and all sorts of other insects.
But Bill had probably been a normal working class guy.
He were a private anyway, and generally when it run rare that anybody of any sort of class, even if you went to college or university, you were put into the ranks of...
We've talked before how, and it's in 1984, how language can, if you change the language, you can just make you stupider because you've got less ways to express yourself. And look what's happened with, TikTok and texting and it's going beyond. You know, you don't even need language; just use emojis.
Well, when they invent words now, the word actually means several things, doesn't it? A bit like how words were used. I like Michael Jackson. I'm bad. Yeah, which actually means you're good. Or so it's twisting the word round. Which when you're young, you don't care because you don't think of it. But when you do actually put some thought into it, saying something sick that's good, what does that mean? That then when something is sick, it again, if you were a Satanist, you would spin it round like that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, turn it all upside down.
You would, and these words come from popular culture, don't they? They come from writers like what we've been discussing.
Getting black people to use the N word. I mean, that's it's horrific.
It's the ultimate, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. It's horrific.
Yeah, the ultimate send down, if you like, that the actual controllers have got the people who are campaigning against racism to actually use the word on themselves. That is
upside down because it's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be. Right, okay, on that note, we're going to finish this episode 7. Join us next time. We're going to episode 8, I suppose, of this
never ending trilomonology.
It is never ending, isn't it? It's just a never ending. We're going to go more into the Huxley family in the next part, where we sort of show some of the other Huxley members. What I want to show is the vast array of detail that some of these people, they started up nursing. So everyone thinks Florence Nightingale started up, but some of these people started all the organisation that nurses. You know, one of the ladies started up nursing. Another one started up theories on how muscles move and things like that. So their academic credentials are ingrained into more or less every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
So we'll see you next time. Bye.